Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our regular Tuesday morning meeting for the Cowlitz County Board of Commissioners. I'd like to invite you all to please rise if you can and join us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This morning, we'll start off with a review of the minutes of our meetings from last week. We'll also review the consent agenda, which are routine matters that we usually adopt with one motion. But if there are any items you'd like us to separately consider, all you need to do is make the request and we will do so. Then we have a number of motion items this morning. Several from Health and Human Services. A number from Public Works. The auditor has a few requests. We also have two timed items, one at 9:45 and another at 10 o'clock. And then we'll have an opportunity for citizen comments for items not on the agenda, but at all times when we discuss items on the agenda, it is open for public comment. With that in mind, I'd like to call on Commissioner Mortensen for his review of the minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm trying this old microphone again. I did review the minutes of the activities last week and I moved to approve those minutes.
There's been a motion to approve the minutes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I also vote aye. Those minutes have been approved. On the consent calendar today, we have a call for hearings for October 14th to consider requests from staff to surplus vehicles and equipment that are no longer necessary for our operations. Typically, those surplus equipment are offered for auction for people to buy the used equipment. Next, we have several calls for bids. Again, bid opening is set for February 21st for two items, polyethylene pipe, as well as reinforced polyethylene geomembranes. These are both materials that are important and necessary for the operations of our Public Works Department. Also, we will have a request for proposals on the disposal of recreational vehicles. The county does end up picking up abandoned RVs across the county where they're on county rights of way. And this is a process to try to dispose of those. There are a number of businesses that specialize in stripping out valuable items from inside those if they haven't been burned. Something about meth, I guess. Anyway. Next, we have another request for proposals for contracts with local vehicle repair shops. We do operate a vehicle repair shop for county vehicles, but there are times in the year that the needs are beyond our capacity to handle in-house. So we have agreements with outside vendors to take care of that. So those bids will come in on the 20th, or those requests for proposals will be considered opened on the 28th. Then we have a number of agreements, contracts, and bid awards. We have agreed to approve Herman Rogers to coordinate services for the benefit of the Veterans Relief Assistance Program. A very tiny portion of your property taxes is set aside to provide relief for indigent veterans. And so this is a program that is done primarily with volunteers. Next, we have an agreement to approve an agreement. We've signed an agreement with our Southwest Washington Regional Airport and are approving an amended budget to allow them to purchase a fuel system. We have made an award from some of the funds that we have available that are matched by state and federal grants. We've also made an agreement. We've agreed to sign on a company called Ecological Land Services for environmental services for a variety of public works projects. And this is a contract that is as needed. Sometimes there are projects where we have to have experts in that field to help us prepare for the various permits required by the state and federal government. So Ecological Land Services has done a pretty good job. It's not to exceed $100,000 by the end of 2024. The next agreement is with the North County Recreation Association that operates a number of recreational facilities near Castle Rock. And they have asked for some improvements for their sports complex, including a picnic pavilion. And they've been awarded $55,500 from the county's tourism fund. Each year, the federal and state government requires that the counties certify that we do not discriminate. That's called Title VI. And we have to submit a report on how we did last year for us to be able to continue to qualify for funds from the state and federal government for road improvements. And so that's the next item that we're approving. We also have executed a contract with a company called Capital Heating and Cooling for HVAC improvements at the Annex, which is right across the plaza to the north of us. Our tenants there have been complaining for years of freezing temperatures or HVAC systems that's not operating correctly. The next is a request from the Treasurer's office. As much as we expect folks to be able to pay their property taxes, there are some times when refunds are required and there has to be an affidavit. She has made a report. That's usually a very minor amount. Every once in a while, though, a large customer will challenge the assessments, and there's an appeals process that goes through, and these refunds sometimes are the result of that reassessment that's done. Under resolutions, we will approve a resolution to rescind the previous Title VI plan. So we're updating that and providing additional information about how we fight the discrimination of all kinds. We have another resolution to accept a list of properties for whom the treasurer is unable to collect property taxes. Property gets abandoned. We can't track down the owners, and it's a little bit strange situation. Again, a relatively small amount of money that's involved. We have another resolution from the Roads Department. It's creating a work project for the Rose Valley Road Culvert Replacement Project. Just the engineering and right-of-way acquisition is approximately $225,000. And another resolution to grant a 60-day extension to Charter Communications. They are reviewing a franchise agreement to allow them to put their fiber optics across county rights of way all across the county. And they just need a little bit more time to go over those documents. We do have a number of notices from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and they are their federal agency that oversees the operation of the dams along the Lewis River. And we are partners with them in a number of projects under the terms of the federal license that allows PacifiCorp to operate those dams. One deals with their agreement to implement fish passage improvements around the dam. Another one is additional comments on the maintenance of the dams, all three dams, Swift, Merwin, and Yale. And another one, again, dealing with recreational opportunities, an extension of time to finish building a barrier-free bank fishing access site. And then we are also reappointing Mr. Ron McCoy to the Rodeo Board. He has been serving, he served a term, and we're going to continue him with another 4-year term. And last, we acknowledge receipt of a resolution from the Long Beach City Council canceling our agreement to operate a homeless program on their behalf. and they'll be operating theirs on their own. Last but not least, we have received notice from the auditor that their staff has approved payment of vouchers and claims totaling almost $12 million. A number of major construction projects have come in, and some big payments on some of those activities are included. That's a huge list. Are there any questions, any ones that you'd like some additional information on? Be glad to ask staff to help out. Good morning.
Good morning. Item 14, please. When you have uncollectible personal property taxes, is that personal property? Is that real estate? I mean, is there a difference? And if it's real estate, does the county then take possession of that property?
See, I'm looking to see if we have the treasurer.
If it is real estate, the county does take possession in effect. They still offer it at some point. You can redeem it. Somebody can, it goes to auction after a certain amount of time. I don't recall the exact amount of time. And sometimes it goes to auction, nobody buys it, and we do it again. But we have the treasurer on board who will specifically answer that.
Good morning, Deborah Gardner, Cowlitz County.
Good morning.
Treasurer. Good morning.
Did you hear the question?
I did. The personal property is personal property. It's the items that a business uses to run their, their business. And sometimes the business closes and they move and everything's shut down, and the assessor's office will then delete the parcel, and we are still trying to collect those property taxes that were due. And after a certain amount of time, when we have no way of getting payment on it, we have to do this process to cancel those. If it's real property and we foreclose on it, we do take that to foreclosure auction. If it sells, if it doesn't sell, yes, the county holds those properties in trust as tax title property.
Okay, so this says personal property. So is there a difference between personal property and real estate property when you make a statement like this for taxes?
Yes, this is just the personal property.
Okay,
There is a difference.
yes. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hi, so I have a quick question on number 10.
Number 10,
Yeah, so
Title 6, yeah.
Title 6. So I've always heard it as Title 9. Is that, I was looking it up back here. Is that two different things? Is there some sort of mistake there? It didn't sound familiar to me.
So I know typically Title 9 refers to non-discrimination in educational activities. That's oftentimes where the sports and women's sports gets
Okay.
connected to it.
Okay, I just wanted to make
This
sure.
is for other
Perfect.
government activities.
I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Anyone else? Good morning.
Good morning. I believe this would be regarding item 10 as well.
Okay.
So the county has to send a report to the state and federal government regarding our efforts in non-discrimination. Is that right?
Yes, this particular request is to the state government, so State Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
So it has to do with the road program that we depend on federal and state funds for.
In my view, I think that just the fact that the county is forced to give a report to any higher government agency is a really good reason not to accept any federal funds for any county purposes, because every time you do that, you're subjecting yourselves to their control, and then you become dependent upon their funds, and then you're subject to their decrees, whatever they may be. It's just an opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve today's consent agenda. Mr. Dahl?
You know, I'd actually like to pull 13 off of here and talk about that separate. I still have some questions on this whole Title VI.
Okay. We'll pull that off.
And other than that, I would move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 13
Okay.
and vouchers warrants in the amount of 11,777,801.77.
Perfect. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 I also vote aye. The consent agenda is approved. And now item number 13, a resolution approving the rescinding of our previous resolution and approving a new one with an updated Title VI plan.
This was, and I know you explained it to me before, but this was for people we hire that we expect them, if like people doing the Tower Bridge or people doing roads and stuff like that. We accept them to follow Title VI, right?
Correct. Susan Eugene is county engineer. So the Title VI program is a federal requirement when you're accepting federal dollars. And it's a two-pronged approach. It is that contractors that we hire comply with Title VI. And then it's also the county complying with Title VI by not discriminating against citizens applying for permits. So it applies across different departments differently. So Public Works is often required to have a DBE, disadvantaged business percentage on their contracts. In addition, when we are doing public presentations, if we are going to a neighborhood that by census tract is less than English proficiency, we are to provide translation services in our documents, and for the speaking, it applies to the sheriff's department for less than English proficiency also. This update came through Public Works when WashDOT reached out to us and said our program was not up to date with the current Title VI requirements. So Public Works spearheaded the update by working with WashDOT and them providing what the updates needed to be. So we created a draft plan. Then we had a meeting with all of the other departments, the department heads, the elected officials, provided them the draft. We gave everybody the draft. It was reviewed by all of the elected officials and department heads that it impacts. And it was then sent back to risk and the attorneys for review prior to bringing it forward. The plan and program will rest with human resources because it touches all of the departments.
Yeah. When I read through this, and this policy applies to all operations in Cowlitz County, including its contractors and anyone who acts on behalf of Cowlitz County. This policy also applies to the operations of any department or agency to which Cowlitz County extends federal financial assistance. Federal financial assistance includes grants, training, equipment, usage, donations of surplus of property and other assistance. And it down in the next paragraph, it talks about things it wants to make sure it doesn't happen: segregation or separate treatment, discrimination in employment. And I don't have any trouble with all this, but where I'm going with this is how do we, you know, my stance on people being treated different because of medical choice. So how can that be included in this and these people be protected from that too, or is that a separate document?
That is not specified in this policy statement. I don't know. I guess we certainly could look at adding medical treatment, but that was not what this specifically was going for. I'm
Yeah.
a little.
I'm not so torn that it needs to, I mean, if it can be added to a simple thing like this, I'm good with that. If we have to work a separate thing, but I'm not gonna back off of these people being treated different because they decided to take a medical treatment they didn't want and losing jobs and stuff. And if it can be included in this, then that's great. If not, then we'll work something else, but it just needs to be known, and I'm not going to back away from that. That's unacceptable to treat people like that. And we need to have that somewhere in our county docs that if we're going to do business with you, you need to treat people right. I guess I'm making more of a statement than I'm really asking you to fix something here. I'm just telling you, I think we need to go a little farther.
Is, excuse me, is there a reason you're not asking us to make a change? It seems like if there is one,
If it can be,
it could be made now in this document.
if it can be made in this document, that's probably more an attorney question. But if it can be made in this document, yeah, I'd like to see that added.
Yeah, I can envision all kinds of complexities. I like the idea. I don't know what you do about somebody who has tuberculosis and decides they don't want to be treated, and you can't really have them around your other employees. But by the Title VI, you might have to if it's written in such a way. So we have to be careful, but I think it's worth exploring it. It's worth, well, let me ask, do you have to have a decision here today on this one?
Yes.
So Jessica's also online. I know WashDOT has been pushing me to get this changed and adopted. And Title VI explicitly calls out limited English proficiency and national origin. I don't know if this medical would be more appropriate under a different policy. I'm not an attorney. This is what the layout of what the requirements were for our Title VI plan. So you might ask Jessica, or we can refer it back to the attorney.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Title VI is specifically for race, color, and national origin. We do have other non-discrimination policies that I would assume would be better to add some additional language for discriminations, because this is very specific to those 3 items. And we do have other non-discriminations against multiple things.
Let me suggest, if this is what the board would like to pursue, we ask legal counsel to draft language that would be appropriate. Probably is better in a different document, but I mean, I think that's a legitimate request. Make sure that they get it so that it's consistent with some.
Yeah, it should be, I think it should be in this document. We already have an example when country of origin, we've parlayed that into having to deal with other, you need to provide a translator and all that. That's, I think I can speak adequately there. That's a bunch of crap, but how many languages, by the way?
Do we have to provide the translator for? It's purely based on the percentage of people within that census tract and what they speak, if we're required to provide it. I don't know the number of languages off the top of my head.
Okay, so you don't have to do the Bantu click or anything like that.
Not specifically called out. If we're in an area where that is the majority of the language, we would have to.
But now, did
In
we?
a totally different area, not road construction, but with district court, they do have a real challenge around about this time of year when the smelt is running, because there are a large group of immigrant communities that like smelt. But if they violate the rules on the limits, they go to district court and they have to have a translator if they, if they need that. Interesting dilemma that district court has to struggle with. And we rely pretty heavily on the Ethnic Support Council to provide those translators, but even they have a hard time coming up with certain languages. So we rely on folks in the greater Portland area.
So in the requirements of Title VI, it specifically calls out the language.
I'm sorry, ask me the question again.
So we talk about origin, so that means I cannot, I would not, should not discriminate against this someone from Assam. But does it mean that I have to have an Assam translator?
For going out and doing public outreach, if you're in a specific census tract where the population is above, and I don't know.
Okay, the same
percentage.
answer then.
Yes, that is when we have to do those translations.
Oh, so this isn't just hiring somebody, it's actually
No, this,
posting.
this is public outreach for contracts that have federal dollars. So if
And
I
that's
was,
called out in the document. I mean, in the requirement.
yes, it's part of the environmental justice requirements when you're doing a public works.
You really had to hurt me there, didn't
I
you?
know that is not what I call it. I look, environmental justice is not what I would have called it. But if we were doing a project through a neighborhood, a road project specifically, and we were doing public outreach documents like mailers or holding a meeting, we would need to translate the documents into that language.
Yeah. I would,
The interesting part is, to my knowledge, there are no census districts in Cowlitz County that meet that threshold for alternative language.
There are a couple, but they are predominantly in
Inside cities.
cities, yes. But we have to have the program in place.
Let me suggest, and we can change this this resolution anytime. Let me suggest that we go ahead and approve this for now, make a referral to council and to further examine an amendment that addresses the concern about medical treatment.
I would do the opposite. I would say, let's refer it and bring it back as soon as possible.
As you wish. I will consider whatever motion you present.
Yeah, I would move to defer this to legal counsel, see if we could add language on medical freedom in here for the county, or and bring it back at its earliest date.
So the motion is to refer this resolution to legal counsel for consideration of adding a clause referring to medical freedom or medical treatment. Do you want a time certain for a report back?
Well, I don't want to delay him any longer if possible. I think I'm hoping he could be back next Tuesday.
Can I,
Let's shoot for next week, but let's put in 2 weeks.
Jessica?
I just wanted to add that this was reviewed by Nicole Tideman when she was here. So we will have to have a full review for Doug to review it now. So it'll take longer than a couple of weeks. So I don't want to attach a date to it because Doug has not reviewed the policy. It was previously reviewed by Nicole.
Yeah, well,
I
this.
don't have any issue with the policy. I'm just saying I'd like to see an addition.
Understood, but Doug said that he wouldn't sign off on it unless he fully reviewed it. So,
But
just
he
wanted to
hasn't
add that.
reviewed whether to add this provision yet. That's not something he looked at. So the motion before us was from you. You were saying 1 week?
Well, as soon as possible.
All right.
I'll just throw out one other comment. We've sort of discussed these kinds of things before, and the answer from the from the legal team has always been, we cannot add additional conditions. I don't understand that, but that's just what I've been told. That doesn't mean that we cannot. It just becomes something we argue at a later time. I mean, we include it and then somebody challenges it.
So the motion before us is to refer the resolution on Title VI updates to council as soon as possible for review to consider adding a reference to medical treatment, medical freedom. Any further discussion?
We've got a hand up.
Yes?
Yeah, I heard the lady from staff mention that there were percentage minimums for public works when considering contractors. What happens if there is not that population represented in the industries required? Does the county then have to seek out those specific ethnicities from neighboring communities to fill that position?
So if I understanding your question, I believe you're asking, when we have a federal contract, we are often given a disadvantaged business enterprise percentage that the contractor is supposed to try to achieve. So that does not have to be the primary contractor. It is often achieved in public works contracts by hiring a business owned by someone that's considered disadvantaged and certified by the state, and it's often a portion of the work. We've had work done by flagging companies. We've also had some geotechnical drilling companies that are owned by disadvantaged business, and it's not a specific ethnicity that's related to the area it's being constructed in. It's a statewide certification that contractors have.
Okay.
Another comment, the gentleman, the second gentleman to speak was cautioning us about all the strings attached, and obviously from this discussion, he was spot on. I don't think we have a lot of choice when it comes to infrastructure because it's pretty massive what public works has to do. So we would not have much of a transportation system if we did not have outside help. Part of my rationale there on saying that's acceptable is because that transportation system is accessible and offered to everyone who travels in the county or through the county. So it's not like you're trying to pick a winner or a loser in general. And specifically on something like this, there's the attribute, and I've coined for myself the thought, if we fix a pothole, it doesn't beget another pothole automatically. And so I don't think we have a choice but to comply, but we can try and push the boundaries as hard as we can.
Any further comments? Those in favor of the motion to delay consideration, refer to Corporation Council as soon as possible for the consideration of adding medical treatment or medical freedom to the Title VI plan, signify by saying aye.
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 I will vote no. I don't want the unnecessary delay because we can always add to this when we get a clear answer from corporation or from council. But it does pass 2-1. Work on the consent agenda. It is now time for our 9:45 timed public hearing. This is on an ordinance amending the vehicle compression brakes code, which is 11.05. by adding portions of China Garden and Tower Road. And our county engineer is back.
Mr. Chairman, it's 10 minutes early for that. I don't know if.
Oh, it is. Oh, I was looking at that.
In the past, we've been admonished. Of course, we go late and we shouldn't do that.
Okay, with your indulgence, since Susan is already up here.
Oh, I'm fine
You
with it. I'm
don't
just,
mind, if you don't mind, well, I don't want to make sure if somebody comes in at 9:45. I'm sorry, I just misread the clock. But we can go to number 23, which is from Public Works. A contract approval for a change order number 2 with Quigg Brothers on Tower Road, the temporary bridge project, amounting to $160,000.
So good morning again, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. So what you have in front of you is the final change order for the installation of the Tower Road temporary bridge. The bridge is in place and under traffic. This was our cleanup change order, and it includes a change caused by a geotechnical discovery while we were installing the abutments. So we put in the west abutment, which is abutment number 1, and everything went in. The foundations went in as we expected. When we reached abutment number 2, which is the east side, we determined when we were driving the piles, they would not reach what they call the tip of the pile would not reach the elevation required for permanent installation of the bridge to resist scour. So that's when your creek eats down through the rock. So we did a quick redesign and installed an additional 6 round piles. So we bored them in, and then through this gravel hard pan layer that they were not driving through, installed the H piles in those cans and filled them for concrete. That change was $189,000 for those changes. And then this also does the cleanup of underruns of other items that were out there. So the total change being requested is $160,000.
so just for total clarification, when this gets paid, the temporary bridge is in place. The foundation will be used again for the permanent bridge. So until the permanent bridge work starts, we're done.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Can you give us a little bit of a hint on what kind of a percentage increase this is over the estimate?
So the original contract amount was about 775,000. Our total contract was just over $1 million. So, Mr. Mortensen always tells me not to do math in public.
16%.
Which? No, closer to twice that, I think.
So it's about,
Out of $1 million?
About 300 out of 700, 3 sevens.
yes. So somewhere in that range, yes.
So it's actually a lot, but that.
We also bid on the 50% plans. So the first change order was due to changes that we made in the design while we were already out to bid, and we did that for timeliness.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is, you don't know how many feet under?
These were, so the tipped elevations we were driving down, so it was 20 or 30 feet down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any further questions? I would entertain a motion to approve the contract.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the contract approval for change order number 2 with Quigg Brothers, as has been discussed.
Any further discussion? Do we have anybody online? Oh,
Just for information, I believe that this whole bridge concept replaced what was a washed out culvert. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it just points out the uncertainty that when you're doing and replacing with a culvert or whatever, you have some certainty in what you're doing. When you're putting piles down in the ground, you don't have much certainty.
And the hand is raised, Darcy. Oh, hand down. All right. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion is approved. And let's go ahead and do number 24, as long as you're up here.
Sure. Number 24 is a supplement number 2 to an existing agreement that we have with WSP USA, which is an engineering firm. The supplemental agreement adds $400,000 to their existing contract, bringing the contract up to $1 million. We are requesting this increase to complete the design of the Eric Creek Fish Passage project. This project, we received notification that we were getting late funding approval through the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. That is PROTECT funding through the federal government. This project replaces an aging culvert that has deteriorated, reached end of life, and it also removes a fish passage barrier in a watershed that the Cowlitz tribe has been working hard to reestablish fish out in this area. We wanted to add it to our WSP contract because they completed a 50% design for the tribe for this project. And this is for them to do a complete the design, convert it over to county standards, and meet the current fish passage requirements. And the design needs to be completed and approved by the state by September. So there's a little bit of a premium cost on it.
So this particular culvert is, helps to connect Eric Creek with Abernathy. So it's in a rural area in west end of the county. And the Abernathy Creek side of the culvert is about 10 feet above the water now. So there's been scouring out. And so that's resulted in the problem with the fish passage. But I know that's a project that the Fish Recovery Board has looked at for quite a number of years. Up above the creek is prime spawning area. The fish just can't get up there. So this will make a difference. Part of the federal government's insistence that we respect the Indian treaty rights to fish in the regular and customary places. So any other questions or comments on that?
Yeah, question. So when this $1 million of work is completed, it'll be a stack of paper on your desk.
So there's only 400,000 going to this particular project. The rest of the money has been spent on other projects that this particular firm has completed for us throughout the past year and a half.
Okay.
So this is just a $400,000 task for them to complete. They've also worked on, this is actually the consultant that's working on the Tower Road project and the temporary bridge project.
And the price is well within what you would have expected.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Give or take 160,000. Ouch. Okay, any other questions? That I had, okay.
I move to approve supplemental agreement number 2 with WSP USA to provide civil engineering services in the amount of 400,000, an additional 400,000 for the Eric Creek Fish Passage project.
Right, any further discussion?
Just a quick one, Commissioner Weber. Your description of scouring below the existing culvert is interesting. We've spent a lot of money in habitating, I'll use that word generically, streams and things like that down. If it's merely scouring, I would think that there's an alternative for reconditioning the pathway below the culvert rather than much more economically than doing a whole lot of replacement. Was that an option?
So it was looked at, but in addition to the scour, the culvert itself is at end of life and has numerous holes in it, to put it nicely. So the
Rusting
culvert
out,
needs
yeah,
to be
yeah.
replaced also.
Thanks, Rob. Any further questions? Comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion carries. It is now 9:45 and we are ready for the timed hearing on the compression brakes code adjustment, adding a portion of China Road and Tower Road to our list.
So good morning, Susan Eugenius, Public Works. So I have received 2 petitions from residents to add a portion of China Garden Road and Tower Road to our list of zones where unmuffled compression brakes are not allowed. We're looking at milepost 2.97 to 4.55 on China Garden Road. That is approximately from Rogers Road to the end of China Garden Road. And then Tower Road from milepost 2.40 to 3.85, and that is in the area of the Tower Road Bridge, not the one that we're talking about, but the existing older Tower Road Bridge, where the neighbors are complaining about the people using the unmuffled brakes. So I'm bringing those forward for your consideration.
Actually, not just for our consideration, but for a public hearing.
Yes.
So you've described where the exclusions will be added to our list. Just briefly, what are some of the other areas that are on the list?
So our existing, we have 5 existing unmuffled zones. One's on Butte Hill Road, Hooper Road, Rose Valley Road, right around the elementary school is one of the zones, and South Silver Lake Road in the residential area beyond headquarters, where it joins headquarters because of the number of trucks going up to the landfill, and then West Side Highway in the area near the Castle Rock city limits, so right in that heavily residential area also.
Near Green Acres?
Green Acres,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So I missed something there. I apologize. So you are proposing that we have this no compression brake zone on China Garden Road?
Correct.
Okay, could you, for the public, roughly outline the process that the citizens had to go through to achieve that?
So the process is they send in a request, a petition signed by residents in the area telling the approximate location and what their issues is, and a petition by the neighbors is sent in. We then go out and look at that area. We bring it to the board for a resolution to set the hearing, and then we hold the public hearing for consideration and give the public chances to comment on it.
So do you need a proportion, a known proportion of the citizens that would be impacted?
We don't have a set proportion at this time.
You just looked at it and said it will cause no danger. It's really not onerous on the truckers.
Correct. And the truckers and our ordinance allows them, if there isn't an emergency, they can certainly use their unmuffled brakes if their others are failing. That is not, it is an allowance within the ordinance.
And this is probably a relatively silly question. I'm always curious when we pass new ordinances, do we expect these to be obeyed?
Of course,
Okay.
we have law-abiding citizens.
But in your experience, it works in other areas, or do you still get complaints from the citizens?
I'm still sure we will still get some complaints from citizens. I know traditionally the truckers that drive for the bigger companies Their trucks are numbered and they know if they're not following the law, citizens will call them or they'll have their truck number. So they will get a discussion from their superiors.
Okay, thank you.
I know about 10 years ago when I first joined this commission, we got a number of complaints in the Butte Hill Road area, but that seems to have been, that has settled down apparently.
Mhm.
So the system works pretty well. Any other questions of staff?
I think my only question was safety for the truckers, but it sounds like that's fine. I don't understand their brakes, to be honest with you, but as long as it doesn't create a safety issue for the truckers, I'm
So having heard the proposal and the description and the questions that we've asked, I would like to open up a public hearing for testimony from the public. And certainly your questions or concerns and recommendations are welcome. So public hearing is now open. Welcome.
Thank you. I've lived on China Garden Road since 1980, and we've had trucks going up and down the hill over the years. And it's only been this past year that people were using jake brakes that was really causing a lot of.
Excuse me, if you'd move the microphone a little closer to you, please.
I'll move up closer.
Go ahead and pull it. It'll actually move closer to you. Move the base. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, for all those years, we weren't having any problems with truckers because they were doing logging up there. But this year it got real bad. My neighbor right across the road, his windows were shaking. In one of the petitions that was I sent around, they noted that the noise was starting at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And I know that they were trying to get the logging done before it got real hot. So they were doing that, but it was really excessive. I contacted all the houses from below the pipeline to the end of the road, and only, I believe it was 3 people refused to sign it. All the rest that I contacted had signed it. There was about 60 signatures I'd gotten. I'm really concerned that, and I had 2 truckers sign it also, that they knew that these truckers could deal with their issue, but it was really obnoxious.
What has changed to bring the increased amount of traffic?
I don't think it was the increased amount of traffic because I know there were trucks going before. It was almost like some of the, during my younger days when people wouldn't have mufflers on their cars and they would be, they liked the noise. It almost like as if they liked the noise that they were creating, but I imagine they're damaging their own hearing too, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Next.
The only con person. Hi, so I have a problem with this ordinance. Anytime you're telling any type of large, heavy equipment they can't use a section of their brake system because of noise is ridiculous. I grew up right at on Spirit Lake Highway, right at the 19-mile entrance where all the log trucks went for Warehouser. Every single day we had to deal with it, but you dealt with it because those are a safety mechanism for very large trucks carrying very heavy loads. And I get some people don't like the noise and sometimes, yes, it can rattle your windows, but I don't think these people are being malicious when they're using these brakes. A lot of the times when you have a new truck driver that has just started, that's their go-to when they're having trouble slowing down their trucks. Basically what you're doing is you're making it to where some less experienced people or people driving these big trucks can't use a section of their brakes, which is, just an extra rule that doesn't need to happen and it isn't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next.
To execute this resolution, how do the truckers know that you've now put in a new resolution? Do you have to put up signs along the road, no brakes or jake brakes or whatever?
Yes, if this resolution is passed, Public Works will sign the roadway that it is no longer allowed on this section.
More
of the
signs
road.
along the roads.
Yes.
Okay. to try to look at all of them. Secondly, is that I live just outside in the county along Pacific Way. I don't have Jake brakes, but I have all of these diesel pickups with their 4-inch exhausts. They rattle my windows too every time they drive by and step on it. So they like to make noise too.
I think Governor Inslee has a plan for diesel trucks. Yeah. I'm speaking in support of the ordinance for Tower Road. This started a couple of years ago when Stordal opened up the quarry. And I have to start off with saying I'm in total support of Stordal because I'm not talking about any of their trucks. I mean, they're driving the biggest trucks with those double containers or whatever, and they make no noise at all. It's really I think it's more of the independent or the small ones. Our first attempt was with ex-commissioner Jay Bush, and he contacted Stordal himself, and they agreed to put up a sign at their gatehouse, and that didn't seem to make a big difference. My wife and I then made calls to the individual trucking companies where we could get their names and so on, just to, ask them if they could, take it easy on the Jake brakes. On the other hand, what we also did was we called up trucking companies and complimented them and offered our thanks for them being more quiet or respectful of the neighborhood. But it still seems to be an ongoing problem. So we're in support of that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Pardon me for not mentioning this before, but one of the problems I see is that there are a lot of independent truckers who are carrying logs. They're getting paid by the delivery, and they tend to be going on the faster side to be able to get more loads of logs to the mills. And because they're going faster, my estimation, they're having to use the Jake brakes, which is causing a greater problem. If they were able to, if they were driving slower, they wouldn't be having as much of a noise problem.
And you mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier that you had truckers signing the request.
Yes, I did. Yeah. One owns a trucking company.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Tim, could you hold on just a sec? We have somebody with her hand up.
Sure enough.
Waiting. Kate Stratton,
Good
go
morning.
ahead. Go ahead.
I live on China Garden Road, at the bottom of the hill from where Jack lives. And the noise is beyond reasonable. I mean, we've talked about how your windows shake and it wakes you up at 2 a.m. It literally sounds like there's a large helicopter hovering over your home. And I waved down a couple of truckers last summer to discuss the issue, and it was a pretty aggressive conversation. And I was told that they couldn't drive down the hill without using Jake brakes, which is not correct. That is some of the problem, is because they're in a hurry to make additional runs. And for perspective, when they're coming down off the road, it's approximately 50 trucks a day. It's not just like a truck here and there. It's just a constant rattling and noise. I also reached out to Weyerhaeuser and had several conversations with their liaison for who assigns the contracts to take down the timber, and then that person hires the truckers. And he said he would attempt to control that. And it did get a little bit better until I guess there was a trucking strike, and then they could only get trucks that were willing to cross the picket lines. And then it escalated again. So this is something that's never going to stop. And I'm certainly have nothing against Weyerhaeuser, but I would hope that the truckers would have a little more respect for the residents that live along the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. So, how was your trip?
It was nice.
Does this ordinance, I missed the very first part here. Was this about unmuffled compression brakes?
The Jake breaks, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference. Just speaking from 18 years of being a truck driver. Now, I can, like unmuffled Jake brakes, nobody has that anymore. It's like a thing of the past. I've never seen it in 18 years, unmuffled brakes like that. Now your Jake brake, essential part of going down hills. You got to use it. I'm sorry for people that have to deal with the noise of it. Believe me, the truck driver ain't having a good time either. You're going down these hills, you got to use the brake. It's truck driving 101. And to say you can't use your Jake brake, and I've been places like this where you're going down a big steep hill and they won't let you use the brake. And a lot of people smoke their brakes there. That's not the way the truck's made to run. So, I mean, here's an apples and oranges. When I moved in my house, it's by the railroad tracks. I don't complain about the train. I prefer if it wasn't right there, but I moved there and it's there. And it was there before me. You move along an industrial road, you live out in the woods here, logging is the industry. These trucks have been doing this forever. Sorry, it's not the quiet, peaceful nature you thought you were going to get, but that's how it is. You live along an industrial road, you're going to have industrial noise. Making an ordinance against using the equipment of the truck, the way it's made to be worked, is not going to help anybody. And you're eventually going to have somebody overheat their brakes. They won't be able to slow down and stop. You're going to have a big accident doing that.
Hold on a second. Quick question. As a trucker or ex-trucker, how would
Tired trucker.
how would you handle the situation if you were not able to use your compression brakes?
Okay, so the way it works is if always like you get trained in a car to pump your brakes, to put them on, let them off, put them on. It's not the way it works with a truck. You got to maintain a steady, even pressure and be in the correct gear when you're coming down a hill. But depending on the length of the hill, that only works so far. Now, there's a lot of common places, like here's one is going in and out of LA. You got to go over the Grapevine. I don't know if anybody's driven the freeway out there, but that is really steep. And on the backside, especially going north, I remember distinctly because they don't let you use your Jake brake there. And it's a huge long hill and they make the speed 35, but just running at normal, if you do it just right, your brakes won't smoke up. I've seen 3 different times there in my years, people on the escape ramp because they overheated their brakes. They expand and they don't work. And you're just basically freewheeling at that point.
Okay, thank
Did
you.
I answer your question?
Yeah, I think the gearing down is part of what I think if you let it get going, you're never going to stop it.
It's funny in California, it just says the opposite. Go over Donner Pass. They don't make you slow down at all. And everywhere else, California is like the Nazi state of truck driving. Nobody ever wants to go there because their rules are so hard. But in Donner Pass, they actually have signs up that say, don't slow down, big hill coming, step on it. You know what I mean? They literally have signs that say that. And it's like the only place in the country that has truck signs like that. But nobody burns up their brakes there either,
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Well, you're talking to the guy that had to respond to accidents of runaway trucks. I'm also an ex-forestry engineer about slope percentages on roads. And that's another reason for the compression brakes, because they're carrying so much weight. And you have a highway truck with 8-foot bunks, and then you have an off-road truck with 11-foot bunks. And having gone to school at an engineering school with other engineers, mechanical engineers in the automotive field, that was the reason for an extra safety factor for inventing the compression brake. And the funny thing is now you see the Dodge trucks with the 5.9 Cummins, and then they raise the truck and then they put a resonator, which is a 4-inch piece of exhaust coming directly off the dual manifold of a 5.9 Cummins engine. And you're sitting on the street corner and you think it's an 18-wheeler coming down the street in Longview. And then additionally, I had to ask my upperclassman, who's now a retired mechanical engineer in automotive, I said, what the hell is all this? They're putting airfoils on little Nissan cars and Honda Civics. I said, where the hell is that coming from? And you can hear them every night. They sound like a compression brake too. Well, the kids got it from a movie which has gone through 7 evolutions, gone in 60 seconds. And they jack up the back of their car and they put a 4-inch resonator on that. And it sounds worse than an 18-wheeler with a compression brake. All you got to do is go out to Longview, Mr. Weber, and listen after dark. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you much. Appreciate it. Just one more time. For clarification on Tower Road, what we're talking about is coming down Tower Road when the trucks are empty. They don't have loads because you're going in to get rocks. And where we're specifically talking about is at the bottom of the hill, you go over Tower Bridge and go around a curve. And that's where the brakes are being used. It's a flat area and it's coming down that hill. And the other anecdotal part I've got is that you never hear this before 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is the time that they're supposed to begin. However, occasionally trucks will start before 7 o'clock and you never hear them. So they're not always using compression brakes because if they want to get under that line and start before the required time, they're doing that quietly. That's it. Thank you. Any other questions?
You have a hand.
Kate Stratton, you still have a hand up? Go ahead. You're muted right now.
My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. When you are going down China Garden Road, as soon as you enter Kalama city limits, there are unmuffled compression brake signs, and the truckers have no issue with this area. So I would just like it extended to the top of the road for the same reason as it's extremely loud. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Right. Seeing no one approaching, no hands up other than Kate. We'll close the public hearing. You've heard the public testimony, you've heard the staff request. Any further discussions, questions?
Yeah. First, just a comment of, I want to commend everybody. I mean, this is a process. It looks to me like it was very well done. A lot of good representation on both sides. My biggest concern is going to be safety. The reason being is sometimes we can overlook that. Anyhow, the safety is obvious. I don't know what the right thing is to do in this case. I am inclined to agree with the ordinance because Susan Eugenia said, nor was it Savannah. Anyhow, hopefully we've got intelligent people behind the wheel there and they know to use the air brakes if they're in trouble. And if nothing else, this ordinance would cut the incidents down substantially, and I think that would help. I would hope the citizens would then think it a success and be appreciative that there was, that there is effort to control that noise.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, questions, comments?
I'm right along the same lines, you know, I'm not a fan of always adding laws and that type of thing, but and I have concerns about the safety, but I you know, like Arn, it sounds like even if this is in place, if they feel they have a safety issue, that they can still use these without issue. So I'm kind of inclined to follow that.
Good morning. Just one question for clarification, and probably Tim could answer this. If you are, you're not using your Jake brakes and you're coming downhill and you're in trouble, can you still then engage the Jake brake while you're in trouble?
I didn't catch that. Maybe you can
I think they're
summarize what you
saying
said.
that if you are getting to a point where you're gonna start having a problem with your brakes, you can go ahead and put the Jake on. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you could do that. But here's the point that I was trying to make in the first place. The unmuffled part of this. They don't have them anymore. It doesn't exist. Never seen it. Unmuffled compression brakes, nobody has that. This is something from the 50s. You're gonna go out and make signs and an ordinance over something that is non-existent. Now, you know, and that's the money side of it. These don't exist. What people probably hear and feel that is an unmuffled brake is the heavier the load and the more the Jake works, it makes more sound. It just gets louder as it works harder. And honestly, some of them, you got a 2-cycle switch and a 4-cycle switch, depending on steepness of the hill. Not everybody has those, but unmuffled, it doesn't exist. This is silly to make a sign that says that.
It's just, so you're just talking, it's just mechanical noise.
Yeah. You know, you can just imagine if you've got a lighter load, you're gonna park down the hill slow, you know, without less making so much noise.
So
I feel like I'm explaining something that we should call the Smithsonian and have them come in to explain that.
No.
when they changed over.
We're trying to determine something here.
Yeah.
Clearly, the people in the China Garden area are not trying to be obstreperous or obnoxious or anything like that.
Right.
They feel that they're being impacted. So now my question to you is, do you feel that this ordinance would have no impact at all because the noise is from a different cause?
Right. And the thing that you're identifying on your sign is not a thing. They're not out there. There's just nobody runs them.
So according to your testimony, then, if I'm a trucker and I do not use my Jake brake coming down there, or use it, the citizens will really not know.
Well, what Larry said, this kind of comes right to that. Okay, so you're on the hill, you're starting to get a little faster than you wanted to. So now you're going faster than if you had started the hill with the Jake on. So when you throw the Jake on, like say to go around the corner or something, it's going to come on loud and it's going to be noisier because you're hitting it with more weight in the beginning. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, but you're testifying that it makes no difference whether you put the Jake brake on or not, and then you're contradicting yourself. I
No.
think I still hear the air brakes when they're applied.
Yes, the modern Jake brakes have, and technically compression brakes, but they're not unmuffled. Everything's running through the muffler, and it's the unmuffled thing. You know, that's like some kind of straight pipe on a car or something. I've never seen one. I can't imagine what it
Right,
is.
but the technical aspect of whether it's muffled or unmuffled right at the moment is something I'm not really thinking is important at a high
really, I
level.
see it as the key part.
At a higher level, I've got a group of people that say they have a problem with the noise. And I have to assess, is it because people are using the Jake brake or not? Regardless of whether it's muffled or unmuffled.
Okay, all right, I'm with you on that part.
Okay.
But like they have a sign when you're coming off in Longview on Tenant Way there, no unmuffled compression brakes, I've seen it for years. And, you just kind of always chuckle when you see those. It's like, who has that? Nobody, and that's my point of it. Isn't that they're using the Jake brake. It's the fact that you're saying unmuffled compression brake. Unmuffled is the part. That's the part I'm trying to describe. That doesn't exist anymore. That's not a thing.
Great.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah, do you have any hint as to the difference in the noise level between muffled and unmuffled?
Well, I'd never have heard an unmuffled one, so I don't know.
Okay, I think that answers everything I need to know.
Susan, what is it the sign actually says?
The sign does say unmuffled compression brakes are prohibited.
Probably need to double check that. Technology changes. Sometimes signs don't.
Yes.
It makes sense.
Since I have lived.
Well,
on
just a
County-
second, that assumes there's a formal definition of the muffling. I go back to the statement that if the people hear the noise, it's there whether it was muffled or not to start with, that the muffling wasn't too successful apparently.
Sure.
I've lived up there since 1980 and we've had logging trucks going up and down. I would not have passed a petition around any prior year. It's this year that it got really loud and it's not on all the trucks. It's only, I think it's just a few guys are making it bad for everybody else. And I don't know the difference why one is really loud and the other ones aren't that loud at all. It is a problem.
Thank you.
Aren't you happy you closed the testimony?
Did I close it? Did I
The
actually?
gavel came down a while ago. See, I guess this goes right back and I just want to point out, it depends on when you put the muffler on, when you put the brake on and how much weight you got and how fast you're going, of how much noise it's going to make initially and carry through with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
What you're hearing is when you hear that loud, that's because it has to be on. Does that make sense? Because that's when you need it the most. And when it's the loudest is when it's working the hardest. So if you're not going to hear that, what you're going to hear is a crash. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Does it make sense that this is how the equipment is built to run? And I'm sorry for people who have to listen to the noise. I got to listen to the train go by 100 times a day. It's how it is. This is the way the equipment's made to work. And when you restrict these brakes, you have accidents. I have 18 years of it. I've seen it.
Thank you. Kate, one more chance. Go ahead. You're muted.
Gosh darn it, I'm sorry.
It's all
So
right.
when the trucks are coming down, the noise will vary on the speed of the trucks. So trucks that are aware of their very heavy loads and come down the road, I'm not approximately sure how fast they're going, but the speed limit is posted at 25 and they're coming down much slower than that. And you don't get that incredibly loud noise. And as Jack said, the gentleman across the street owns a trucking company. And he came out with me one day to talk to one of the truckers. And he said that it is an expensive process, but they can muffle that noise. So again, he currently owns a trucking company and runs trucks. And he said there's absolutely no reason for them to be making that much noise. It's a choice of the driver and the company. Thank you.
Okay. Let's try this again. Sure, go ahead. Everybody else is.
Okay. So I just wanted to say, maybe you guys could table this, because in your actual ordinance, it says unmuffled. And from testimony from a trucker, we've heard that that's not a thing anymore. And I do hear that there's this trucking company owner that's saying all these things, but without his witness testimony here or statement, I don't, like, we have an expert with over 18 years of trucking experience saying there is no unmuffled. So maybe rewrite your ordinance to say what it is you're actually intending for, like the Jake brake itself, and not just have unmuffled, because if there's no unmuffled compression brake, then your ordinance is obsolete, and that just seems like a waste of time and paperwork and policy. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, the hearing actually technically closed, but, and I don't think we have a motion on the table, so.
You don't. Would
So-
you like one?
I would.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the proposed ordinance amending CCC 11.05 as has been discussed.
Thank you. Any further discussion? One of the things that strikes me is language. The trucker is responsible for the safety conditions, can use compression brakes if need be under the conditions. The other thing that strikes me is that this is one of those processes that attempts to balance the various interests that are in conflict. If the proposal was to ban compression brakes countywide, that's a non-starter. But the fact that we have 5 relatively small, short areas with the hundreds of miles of roads that we have, seems like this is the kind of process that is effective. We hear the concerns. We want to honor the rights of the truckers to do their business in a reasonable fashion, and the residents to have a relatively relative assurance of acceptable peace and quiet, not perfect, but what they can live with. So I want to honor that process. We may need to look at the language, and I think staff is going to kind of look at that and see if that. We also have to comply with state rules and regulations on those kinds of things anyway in signs. So, but so I'm gonna vote in favor of it as well. Any other comments?
It's, we've heard that it's not very many, it's a few abusing the system. And we've heard that what causes it is trucks that are over the speed limit. So it appears we have a mechanism in place already that enforcement would slow them down and ease some of that. I have trouble with things that are passing laws that affect everybody that only a few are causing. So, and then I still have issues on the safety part. So, I'll oppose.
All right.
How many votes does it take to pass? Like, can I cast half vote one way and half vote the other way? Because the arguments are very good. And I hadn't thought of the last thing that Commissioner Dahl mentioned, which is we already have a mechanism in there. I still think I'll vote for it, but it is interesting that I would be open for a report in a while that says it's not necessary, let's undo it. So we should be open to undoing ordinances.
Yeah, are you open to just a report back on how the Jake brake enforcement is doing? Say, give a year and kind of look at all the different zones that we have.
Of course, I can add that to Public Works' list to do.
Okay.
And then because this is really in your area, are you comfortable enough with, are you on the recommendation side also?
At this point, yes, but I will need to be doing more research and following up on these zones.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Opposed?
I also vote aye. That motion does pass 2-1. Thank you. We are past time for our 10 o'clock public hearing. And our star staff witness today is still with us. So this is a review of the 6-year transportation improvement plan, sometimes affectionately known as our TIP, but sometimes not affectionately known. This is a moving target. Every year we adjust according to the needs and the assessment of staff on the deterioration of different roads and the needs for repairs and the adequate funding sources to make things go. One of the classic examples I remember talking about is 10 years ago, the half bridge was on the list and it stayed on the list. And it wasn't until 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I think, we finally put together the funding to replace that half bridge. Is the bridge that goes over the BNSF main line through the tunnel, over the tunnel at Rocky Point. A 1919 bridge that finally got the funding after probably many more years than just 8 or 9. So these are important things to have on the list. Go ahead with your presentation and then we'll proceed on.
So Susan Eugenius, I've been resisting saying this pun, but I'm going to say it anyway. So changing gears, we're going to move on. We're going to move on. I don't like having to amend my 6-year plan, but in order to accept federal funding, this plan needs to be amended. We are requesting 2 changes to our 6-year plan. The first is to that Eric Creek culvert on Abernathy Creek Road project that we discussed earlier. It was included in the adopted plan as priority number 48, and that was prior to us learning we were going to get the funding, because at that time we didn't have any secured funding. So it was lower on my list. It was something I was working on funding. So we've secured the PROTECT funding in an amount just over $3 million, and there is no local match required on this project. It's funding, that's federal funding being passed through WashDOT. Excuse me. And PROTECT stands for that long acronym, and it's resiliency in transportation is the best name from it. So the changes on the plan is changing 48 funding from fish barrier removal to PROTECT funding, changing it from plan to secured, and moving the years to a 23 design with construction starting the end of this year and going into next year. So that's the first project change. And the second project change is a error that was made. I do make them, I try not to. On project number 8, which is South Cloverdale Road. When we created the STIP, there was some federal funding that we had already obtained and agreed to that was left off of the plan in about just under $1.5 million from STPR for a construction phase. So we're making that change also.
So I am wondering about the current Tower Road repairs at Rock Creek. We had agreed that we would be using local funds for the whole thing.
Mhm.
But we've made an ask to both the state legislature as well as we will be asking the federal government for some assistance. That will be in a later edition.
So-
A later amendment if we move forward with that.
Depending on when it comes through, we would either amend it or it would be included next
Next year.
year's. We are working through with the local funding with the design money, aiming to have a 2024 construction. So most of that money would come through and we could just add it onto next year's 6-year plan when we hold that hearing in December.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So any other questions of staff
No.
report?
That makes sense.
I will open up the public hearing. And again, this would be an opportunity to suggest other areas that we need to be considering in the future that aren't already on the list, or other commentary on the existing road plans. So we'll open the public hearing. Slowly. Don't everybody crowd. There we go. So, right. Yeah, all right. I get it.
Real action started. Hey, I'm just curious, as long as we're up here about it, is how's the half bridge going? Because it seems to be taking forever.
It is taking forever, and I apologize to everyone for that. We were shut down by BNSF for the third quarter. We have scheduled actually today what they call a pre-pick meeting, which is the contractor, BNSF, and all the inspectors inspecting their crane pads and their plan for setting the girders. And fingers crossed, this time everything meets BNSF satisfaction, and you will see girders starting to be set tomorrow if everything goes to plan. And then we'll be moving forward with an opening date depending on when we can get asphalt, late March, early April.
Oh, wow. So it won't be
So
till
again,
April.
so again, what she mentioned to us before is that the railroad shuts it down because that quarter is the busiest quarter for them.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's reasonable.
I kind
It
of
does
figured there'd
kind of
be some
raise the
rail
costs,
delays to
doesn't it?
April to get,
Yeah.
you say April till they get pavement on it?
Well, we have to place all the girders, then we have to set the membranes. We have a couple more concrete pours, then we have some earthwork. So we're looking late March, depending on how the weather goes. I don't want to overpromise, so that's why I'm thinking late March, early April. If we get some bad weather, the road work itself will be slowed down, the approach work.
So that's going to be almost a year then of that project being under construction. Well,
So,
Thanks.
so Tim, only a year.
so far.
You realize the Elwell project was proposed in 1966 and I was still in high school, so.
Yeah, well, that's taken some time, but it's a good spot. You know, when I was a truck driver, I used to have to drive over that old bridge and, you know, sometimes it'd be like, I just drive really fast.
Thank you.
Didn't hit the
Just
Jake
get
brake
the
as you
cab
come around the
over.
corner.
Any other comments? I don't see any hands up. Any other comments? All right, we'll close the public hearing and immediately go into it, considering motion.
I move to approve the amendment to the 6-year transportation improvement plan for the years 2023 to 2028.
Any further discussion? Oh, Mr. Samuels. You are, there you go. Thank you.
That was a mistake. Sorry, I'm waiting for constituent comments. I apologize.
Okay, thanks. All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. That motion does carry unanimously. Now we'll go back to 18, a list of requests from Health and Human Services. Savannah and Susan, thank you for testimony. Good morning. Gina James is our, I can never remember your title, Manager of Human Services, Assistant
Deputy Director, Health and Human Services.
Deputy Director. Thank you.
Yes, we have a number of items on the agenda today. We did spend some time recently at a work session going over these. I do believe Commissioner Weber, you may have been out of town for that work session. The first item on the agenda is an amendment to a contract we have with ALS Environmental. This is sort of a cleanup. The amendment is extending just the end date of this agreement. ALS Environmental helps to process and do water testing for Group B water systems locally. So we're just extending the end date through the end of the year.
No change
So-
in money.
Correct. No,
So you have a typo on the print there, right?
where, which,
It's not 2022, but 2023.
oh, no, it is 2022. So we,
Oh, it's a
The-
backfill.
right, sort of a cleanup item.
Okay.
It's amazing how they get paid, even though the contract's expired.
Well, we have an invoice to reimburse, so we're hoping to get this taken care of.
Any further questions? Staff?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agreement amendment number 19-005 with, well, as has been presented.
Right? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion carries. Number 19.
Okay, item number 19 is an amendment to an agreement we have with the Washington State Department of Ecology. The Department of Ecology provides some funding to follow up and respond to solid waste complaints in the community. So when we get phone calls from citizens about sewage leaking or garbage buildup, things like that, that we can go out and follow up on those items.
So you said sewage leaking, that would be pipelines, or are you talking about septic tank leaks?
Like septic tank,
Okay.
often it's like a RV parked somewhere and it's concerned about where the sewage is going, that type of thing. So this amendment is truing up the funds that were provided in the original agreement. So it's decreasing the contract amount to be more in line with what we have used and what we anticipate utilizing for the remainder of the contract period, which goes through June of 2023.
Okay. Any questions?
Recently, we had discussed sort of intensifying an effort in this area. Do we recall that?
The recycling center mess out at the recycling center in
Down
West
in
Longview.
Woodland.
That one's what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Would that pay for cleanup of the mess at the transfer station? We saw some pictures yesterday that were pretty horrific about irresponsible dumping of solid waste, garbage.
I believe this is specific to following up on complaints. I can double check. I'm not sure it covers cleanup cost. I can double check on that though.
Yes. But specifically, there are areas around the county where people just throw garbage
Mhm.
from mattresses to this and that, but oftentimes they leave identification there. And
So you might want to double check with Mr. Moss, because he was going to kind of present some kind of a recommendation on how we can prevent that stuff from happening. As you know,
yeah,
we have to clean it up, but
do we need to, would that impact our decision on number 19? In other words, yeah, do you have to have an answer here today on that?
If you want me to go back and find that information out and bring this back, we can do that. I was trying to read very quickly, which isn't always a good idea.
I just, in the title that we have on the agenda is investigating complaints and education and outreach to prevent solid waste violations. So I would assume that would be included. That might be just an additional resource. Probably pay for signs.
Do you have a recommendation then, Mr. Chairman?
I would. We need to continue the agreement and
Right, I just don't want to give away funds we could use for cleanup. But, and I don't know if that's on the table or not.
Yeah, it might be a conversation with ecology to kind of see what
Yeah.
the scope is of what we could do. But I'm happy to do that. And
So it's all right,
It
all right
says,
if we table it?
yeah, it says recipient is encouraged to seek ecology pre-approval for other costs, so it might be worth a call to them to see if they would help with some of that instead of just.
and the fact of the
Give 'em-
matter is this is over in June, so we'll be looking at a new one anyway. So, but
right, the current agreement just has more funding in it. And so this, this amendment was just to true up some of that cost. So yeah, we're happy to follow up and have some more conversation about that.
good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion to approve.
So I'm still confused. If there is opportunity to table this and learn something, I would do that. If it's totally academic, I would just say, yeah, let's approve it.
I think we could table it and try to learn more about what we could utilize that funding for. I think as Commissioner Dahl mentioned, we could talk to ecology and see if that would be an allowable use of funds if we were hoping to help with some cleanup costs.
Can we
Well,
table
thank
it for 2 weeks? Would that be enough
Sure.
time to follow up?
So, Mr. Chairman, I move. Oh, it's your turn. Mr. Chairman, I do not move.
Mr. Chairman, I move to table agreement amendment number 21-050 with the Washington State Ecology to give staff time to see if we could use some of those funds for other solid waste issues we have
They said for 2 weeks, right?
for 2 weeks.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion is, that agreement is tabled. Number 20.
Yes, so item 20 is an amendment to our consolidated contract with the Department of Health. This particular amendment is adding funding for Group B water systems. This is the funding that allows us to have a zero cost for permits for Group B water systems. So that's what we utilize this funding for. We can also support the Group B water testing, which we talked about a little bit earlier with this funding. So this is adding that particular funding into this contract period.
All right. Any questions? Sure. Is the light on?
The green light's on?
Oh.
Can I do it?
Let me- Ah,
There's a button.
you've
It's
now
the-
been included into the club.
No, I didn't have it. This modern technology is above me.
Okay.
Group B water systems. I've been here before you commissioners about unfunded mandates and misidentification of water systems. And you wanted me to pay for a system that didn't exist and then meet all the requirements and then pay you a fee for doing absolutely nothing. Now you've got a grant from the State Department of Health, an amount of some $4,000, and now you're going to pay for all these fees and water testing too. How long is this gonna last?
Question first, the amount seems strange both
I've got
ways.
it, I've got it right here.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yep. So
Yes, correct. It is 4 million.
So our consolidated contract, that's the amount total in that consolidated contract across all of the various bodies of work. This particular amendment for the Group B work is $25,878.
How
Yeah,
much, I'm sorry?
I see that under changes.
Correct, 25,878.
Why all of a sudden are you getting a grant from the state to do these procedures when you were trying to extort the money out of the taxpayers and misidentifying water system? Why all of a sudden did this money come from the State Department of Health?
I think the legislature decides to fund certain things and then it comes down to counties and grants. So I don't know why it was chosen to be this. The state, I think, typically is sort of the lead with Group B water systems, and they've asked counties to help with that. And so they are allocating some of this funding to help with that.
Previously, why were you trying to, for the lack of a better word, extort the money from people who didn't even have a Group B water system like myself?
I don't know the specifics of your situation, and I'm happy to connect with you to learn more about that. I know there's a permit, there's various permits and fees that are established that cover the cost of staff to do the permitting.
Now, all of a sudden, we've done a 360. And if you remember, Commissioner Mortensen, I believe your words were, did they exceed their authority? They weren't even providing the service. They were wanting me to pay for this Group B water system when I didn't even have a Group B water system. And your comment was, are they exceeding their authority?
In most cases, the answer is yes, of course, but it's not an issue for our staff here on that. It's for an issue.
But now all of a sudden you get this money from the state Department of Health, and now they're going to pay for it.
No, don't recall the details. It's been what, 3 years, maybe? 2
It's
years?
a little bit longer than that, but
Yeah.
I can show you all the documentation.
I have all the confidence in that. There's some issues with this that are, I think, quite obnoxious to me. For one thing, it's an omnibus bill. And I've been bitten before when if we approve this, there is some implicit assumption that you approve everything else that's in there. It's the omnibus bill kind of thing. Because like you said, it's 25,000 for this, but it's a $4 million some odd dollar contract. I don't like these, but nevertheless, the water part of it, I think I recall seeing it just about every year. Am I not right? It's been dealt with before, right?
We did have it last year as well. Before that, I can't recall. I'd have to look.
Yeah, I know I've seen it before in this context. So it's not like they figured you would be here and let's really pour salt on the wound.
Well, it's just really odd. Now the money comes from the state of Washington and all of a sudden, and my specific bill was for a Group B system. And hell, when I took possession of the property after my parents died, I tried to reassert the water right that was in existence since 1900. And that was through the Department of Ecology. And they said no. And some of these Group B wells had a Department of Ecology registration number on it. Yeah, this is what can happen when you receive a grant. Nobody knows what the hell's going on.
Right.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I don't clearly understand what Group B water systems are, but when he mentioned wells, I'm very suspicious of our Department of Ecology putting out money. There must be a whole lot of strings attached to it to some way or another dip into the conditions of the people that do have wells, as the state is trying to get it rid of as many as they can.
Thank you.
Are there any strings attached that we haven't? Are there any strings attached?
This funding is primarily for the permitting. And so, there's certain rules that go along with permitting a water system. And as for clarification, a Group B water system is considered a well system that serves less than 25 people per day. That's how it falls into the Group B category. It's often private residences who are on a shared well. So different homeowners sharing the same well is most the most common scenario.
So
Okay, so-
shared well, not the individual. Well,
It's, I don't know all the terminology very well. It's contingent upon the number of people that use that water source.
so it's just class A and class B, isn't it? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there's individual wells and then there's group A, which are the larger, if they serve more than 25 people per day. And then group B is if that smaller category.
As soon as you have a shared well, then the concept is that the government steps in to assure the quality, while if you're on your individual well, it's up to you.
Correct. There's initial permitting that happens and water testing that happens. And then beyond that, there are some strong recommendations for testing, your individual wells, but I'm not aware of the enforcement of any enforcement.
And for Group B and Group A, we're still obligated to do the testing by ecology rules or health rules or RCW.
I believe RCW, or it may be listed in WAC for that. And I know they're different. So Group A and Group B have different requirements. I believe Group B is required to, beyond the initial permitting process, required to get tested once every 3 years or inspected and tested once every 3 years, something like that.
No matter what happens, I look forward to working more closely with you on trying to figure out these omnibus
Sure.
bills. It's going to take more than we usually have spent time on.
So this is Amendment 6 to the con.
That's correct.
Okay, I was used to seeing that in our descriptions. Consolidated contract, a con. And we've had up to a dozen amendments over the course of a three-year contract, right?
A lot,
Yeah.
a lot of amendments.
So they give us, this money covers the testing of these group wells to make sure they're in.
Correct. It's if the initial permitting cost, which is, we've historically had a Group B permit fee. And so we now have that at zero because of this funding covers that cost. And then we can also support some of that Group B water testing. So if somebody wants, has concerns about the water from their shared well, they can go in and get it tested and we can reimburse that cost.
So at some time, I think you offered to work with Mr. Dragic to resolve the issue that he talked about not having a Group B, but being charged something. And I don't understand that, how that could be. Mhm. Thank you.
So my point was, you made 2 points. One is the original testing and then the ongoing permitting. The State Department of Ecology has the history of changing the regulations on that testing. For instance, in the old days, we had 50 parts per billion of arsenic that was allowed. They've taken those on down to 5 parts per billion. The body doesn't know the difference on that, except that it's a hassle and harassment. So those are ways that they kill our ability to have wells, that we can't meet 5 parts per billion of arsenic, of natural, et cetera. That's just one example.
Yeah, just with Gina's statement on that, accepting this doesn't change the reality he just mentioned, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Although I would imagine those regulations come along regardless of whether we get these funds. They're gonna have those regulations anyway. Unfortunately, irritatingly. Yes, sir.
To answer if anybody worked with my late parents or me, no, they just sent me a bill. And that's why I came. You were on the board.
He was,
and
yeah.
I think you were here and I forget who was in Mr. Dahl's position. The bill just came every month. Okay. Going back to 1900, before we were a state, 89.
What?
At that time in 1900, it was called the Department of the Washington Department of Conservation. And the pioneer bought the adjacent property just for the water. Well, he was a good old boy and he supplied everybody before there were any of these regulations. And for over 100 years, there was no problem until this Class B came in. It caused a lawsuit in the last few years of my parents' life. That cost thousands of dollars. And there's a court order on my property now, signed by the former Judge Warning, saying I can't touch the mile pipeline that used to supply, and the limit was 5 at that time when the county started sending these bills. Before that, the Department of Natural Resources handled all the water rights, and there was a big shuffle. The department didn't want to handle the water rights, and there was a big legal expense that we had to go through when it was transferred to the Department of Ecology. Okay. My parents died. I got to transfer the water right. So I waste time going up to that city that's a tribute to Murphy's Law that they call Olympia, and I file the water right. It was a $50 fee, and it worked ever since 1900. But no, when it came to me, they kept sending me the permit back. Oh, it goes with the property. Well, the infinite wisdom of the Department of Ecology, they didn't check anything. The water wasn't on the property, it was on the adjacent quarter section. And it never did get resolved. Oh, we'll make a note of it. After we spent all this legal crap transferring it from the DNR to the Department of Ecology. Okay, parents are dead, I still don't have a water right. But on the deed, I hold the mineral and water rights. God knows where that is, and I'm going to come back and comment on that in the public comment section. Okay, now comes Cowlitz County every month. Here comes this, I'm a Group B water system. Well, guess what? They didn't even check. All these people hooked up to their own wells. And they still don't know that. So when it comes to permits, you wonder who the hell's minding the store? I sure as hell do. Is it the county? Is it the Department of Ecology? Now we got the Department of Health giving you a grant to pay for all these Group B water permits and water testing, which when I was in my younger days, the health department did it for free. They did soil testing for free. That's all gone. It was gone when I left high school. I had Oregon State where I went to school. They did it free. And I wasn't even a resident of the state of Oregon. So now down in Columbia County, in the Extension Department, there's a notation in their records, a field and a spring in the state of Washington. Washington and the county didn't help me a goddamn, but Oregon did. Explain that one.
All right. I would consider a motion, if you'd like.
Mr. Chairman, I painfully make the motion to approve the agreement amendment number 21-070 as has been discussed by staff and others.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. That motion will carry. The next item is dealing with campus towers.
Yes, the next two items, we have an agreement with Campus Towers and an agreement with Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington. Both of these agreements come forward today as the result of a request for proposals that was issued a few months back, where we solicited proposals for projects to address affordable housing in Cowlitz County. We received 2 proposals through that process, one from each of these entities, and reviewed those proposals and decided on award amounts. So these agreements are in front of you today with Campus Towers, with an agreement that shall not exceed $752,200 to increase affordable housing, as well as the agreement with Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington with a not to exceed $692,200.
And that's the gap funding that they still needed to finish the project.
Yes.
So I thought we'd given them both the same amount, but we understand why it's a little bit less.
Right. They have a small service component in their proposal that we may address in the future when the project is complete.
So I would consider this in a single motion if we want. I think we made those initial decisions before you joined the commission. I don't know if you have any additional questions.
No, I was sitting in the audience when you made those ones.
Right.
I would just put these together. I would move to approve both item 21, Campus Towers project agreement not to exceed $752,200. And item 22, Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington agreement to not exceed $692,200.
All right, you've heard the motion. Are there any comments?
Item 20, Housing Opportunities Southwest Washington has numerous projects. What is this proposal for?
This is for a new project out in West Longview. Forget the name of the project, but they're adding 40 apartment units for low-income families.
Okay,
It's
so in
a
summary,
new
that-
project just west of the Presbyterian Church. The church donated the land.
yes.
So a new apartment complex will be.
So the information left out is that is a 16.5 proposed $1 million project with 40 units. So, and it's termed affordable housing. Is that, again, I'll testify, that is not affordable housing, that is subsidized housing. We, the taxpayers, are one way or another paying all $16.5 million for this project. Then under a market rate or whatever, those apartments will be basically at $400,000 a unit if you were in private enterprise. And then that is subsidized housing that lasts forever. So I understand the housing authority doing these, that's the way they get money. But the terminology affordable housing, all of us taxpayers are paying for every cent of it, one way or another, except that when they get the 40 tenants in there, they will pay a small portion according to what they can afford. That's the affordable part, what they can afford, which is a small portion of that. So I want to just make it clear that this is subsidized housing. I spoke to the housing director and she says, well, I have to use those words because that's the way the government states it for us to get all of our money.
Anyone else?
I could comment on that.
Sure.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. If I had a choice, I would not collect the $200 or whatever it is on the fees, on the doc recording fees. And we wouldn't be doing this. Partly, I look at it as just what you did. Let me normalize that. $400,000 to build one apartment. That is outrageous. Every government contract you'll see around is outrageous. And but we have the money and you saw what it what the proposals were before was to, well, Camp Alabama, you got the money. A valid question at this point, and I don't know the answer to that, is, well, we just recognize here today in the consent agenda that the city of Longview has decided they're going to take care of their own homeless, and they're going to get their own portion of the document recording funds. This is in Longview. Should we be doing it? I don't know the answer to that. Since we started this program before all this Longview thing, I think we go through with it. But like a lot of things, I'm not easy. I'm not. I am uneasy over this thing, and I welcome your comments, appreciate them, and I can only offer apologies.
So for further comment, again, you mentioned Camp Alabama. So that's well over $2 million for 50 8x8 pallet houses, basically big dog houses, at $50,000 a unit, if you look at that.
It's sort of 2.5, yeah, and
Well,
those
yeah.
are.
So if you take 2.5, that's $50,000 a unit for each of those. So I made the comment before, you give me $16.5 million in private enterprise, and I'll do more closer to 80 or 100 units, because I was looking online the other day. I can go buy modular homes or mobile homes for $50,000 to $100,000 a piece and place them on properties. But again, that does not qualify for all of the government regulations that we have to go through. So when you talk about affordable housing as commissioners and in this county, the rules have to change a little bit in order to identify what is acceptable as affordable housing, not subsidized housing, but affordable housing, and what private enterprise can do if you give them the money and give them some opportunity. We have parks all over that are well under that are affordable housing.
Yeah, a problem we face is picking winners and losers. And that's something I don't want to do. I don't want to say, well, we're going to give this developer $1 million or $8 million to develop housing. I much prefer something that is kind of blind. I had mentioned that about building and planning. You build it, we'll refund you all the permit fees out of this. The fundamental question is, all of this has been intertwined with the welfare system intentionally. And you all pay for that. The more we subsidize the housing one way or the other, the more expensive it is for people who are not, who are actually employed and paying taxes. It's a terrible system.
Right. And I know you're not going to take up my offer to put them, but you can push back on the housing authority. You can push back on these other sources and say, what are your other options other than building a $16.5 million facility for 40 units?
I forget the quote who said it, but it's those in power do not relinquish power. And we're talking power here. It goes back to the comments some other people said here with strings attached.
Well, when government funding is involved, we've talked about the strings that are attached, and I've mentioned before that the whole issue of housing with using government funds is that there are two huge cost drivers that private industry may or may not have to deal with. One is the stormwater retention ponds, the little fenced off sinkholes, which are superfluous inside a diked area, but that apparently doesn't matter. I've had contractors say, they have to devote 25% of their property for those sinkholes. That means they can't build houses on that area. They've got to set it aside, raising their costs. And then the second thing is, in the fine print of those contracts, there's this nifty little phrase of prevailing wages have to be paid, which in home construction is a little bit artificial if you're not using government money. You get the job done. But again, prevailing wages, whether you like that idea or not, that still is a cost driver. And yeah, it's probably close to 50% increase if you use government funds because of those two rules and regulations. One's
Some of the-
environmental and one is, I guess under the current phrase would be environmental justice.
Yeah, some of that is true, but I think it's the minor, it's the minor element. It's not minor, but compared to the big gorilla in the room, it is somewhat minor. I had lost my train of thought in my excitement of trying to follow your comment. My apologies. I'll think about it in a moment.
Tim?
So in the big picture, has the government ever done anything in housing that's been a success? You know, it's like, has that ever happened? To me, it's like this. You use this term affordable housing, and Commissioner Dahl explained this the other day. There's no such thing around here. There is no such thing. And you can, so then what's the government going to do? The government's going to come in and start building housing. And when has that ever worked? You know what I'm saying? But this affordable housing term is like, goes right along with green energy. I mean, it's non-existent. It's like, it might as well be a cloud in the sky. Now, I have a good idea what we can do with this document recording fee money that will benefit people, and you could call it affordable housing. And what you can do is just take up the total, divide it out between the taxpayers in the county, and give everybody a little rebate on their property tax. Now that would be making my housing more affordable, and also rewarding the people that are actually hanging on. And you know, there's a lot of homeowners just hanging on. A little rebate there, a little shot in the arm, wouldn't hurt at all. And it could go right under that title. So there's my suggestion.
I
Let's-
propose to do that with the ARPA money.
I say we take the money and just, you know, cut it up here between us citizens here in Cowlitz County, and we could have a little party. You know what I'm saying? Be
You
great.
can't get there from here. They won't give you the money. period.
Nice try, Tim, but
Well, you know. Citizens.
you did ask about, has the government done any good in terms of assisting housing? And you might disagree, but I can think of two situations where a government grant has been helpful at achieving affordable housing and other social goals. In fact, one of them deals with campus towers. Years ago, campus towers came to the city council when I was on the city council with an interesting challenge, a problem. They said, we are facing a personal hygiene challenge in campus towers. We said, what? Don't all the apartments have bathrooms? And they said, yes, they do. They all have tubs. And the senior citizens can't, they no longer, they're older. They said originally when Campus Towers was built, it was like 55 to 75, and that was not a problem. Now the average age is much higher and people can't get in and out of tubs for showering, so they weren't. Sponge baths or whatever. And so the proposal was, the request was from a federal fund, Community Development Block Grant Fund, was to pay for converting those tubs into open showers so that people could use showers and solve that problem. So, I mean, that's kind of one example. And I remember one of the discussions, we had one of the council members were just furious. He says, look, they're not charging adequate rent to be able to take care of those kinds of repairs. Well, aren't they charging them more rent? And we were looked at the rent, and yeah, they were not charging very much rent. Made it more affordable for those seniors. So anyway, that's one example. Second example dealt with a whole different problem when the Cowlitz County began operating a drug court, and we're working with people who are going through treatment in order to avoid going to jail. And they identified that one of the challenges was when people were done with their program and you know, released from the threat of jail and all that, housing was an issue. And particularly for women who had lost custody of their children. And they wanted their children back. They didn't have the opportunity to get housing on their own. And so agencies got together in the city and the county, I believe, as well as the housing authority, created a program called Phoenix House and built an apartment that's been going now almost 20 years. But recently, before this council, I think, or this commission, we were asked for a grant to replace all the kitchen cabinets. Remember that? Isn't it?
I do, and so does Mr. Kozlowski.
Yeah, and it was because the cabinets had failed. They'd gotten leased, cheap cabinets. And we went ahead and used some funds, and I can't remember, it might have been CDB. Well, I can't remember what funding it was from, but we assisted them in order to maintain a type of subsidized affordable housing for mothers in a program to gain custody of their kids. Those are both examples of very specific and targeted good results, like arguably good results. That doesn't really begin to address the things that Ron was talking about. How do we really get affordable housing for the people that really can't afford the huge rates? And one proposal is you just have to build more houses. Supply and demand will address that. But even though the government says we want to do that, they put additional rules and regulations that make it very difficult.
So the other answer to to your question is there are no examples. You can go through the nice apartment buildings in Carlsbad in Bohemia, built by the Soviets, and you know what happened to this former Soviet Union. You look around. If you want to, you can always pick a success. If you want to then look at the entire value, the proposal, the amount of money we taxpayers spend on Phoenix House and all these other things far exceeds what I would call the market value. The cabinets that were replaced were because they were beaten apart. What you own, what you built, you take care of. What you're given free, you don't take care of. Anybody walking through a neighborhood knows, oh, that's a rental, that's a owner occupied, that's a rental. It's all clear. In the United States, we have some horrible examples of public housing on the East Coast. We have some pretty bad examples up in the Seattle area overall. And again, what you do is you measure how much did we spend for what we got, and it's ridiculous. Government is a big mistake.
Well, you make a good point there of saying, the expenditure versus what do you get for it? But really, should we be even involved in the area at all?
Well, that would be the conclusion.
I don't know that it's really a function of government. It's it doesn't. This is where we get back to the social welfare state. It's like the government's gonna take care of stuff, and here you go. But pretty soon, it feels like it gets closer all the time. You're gonna run out of people that are the ones that can pay for it, the taxpayers, and in a basic principle, just what I'm trying to say is.
Do you know the H.G. Wells book, The Time Machine?
Mm-hmm.
You know the movie? Anyhow, there's a group of people, the Eloys. They're perfectly happy to be totally taken care of. Then there are the Morlocks. They're perfectly happy to take care of you and do all the magic. But then when they're hungry,
they eat you.
And everybody seems happy. That's just the way life is. I'm going to forfeit everything just so I can be comfortable here today.
Yep.
I do have a hand up. I want to double check. Tom, you said you wanted to wait till public comment, but your hand came back up. Go ahead if you have a comment on this issue.
I do have a comment, not to detract from this casual hatred being showered on the poor. Commissioner Mortensen once again lied about the cost of Hope Village. It was $1.1 million for the 50 units that will serve the goal anyhow. And it would seem they're meeting it for the time being. The goal is to serve 4 persons per unit per year. So enough with this ongoing lie about $50,000 per unit. It simply is not true. He should do better and at least admit the true costs. Thank you so much. I'll still wait for constituent comments for my other comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
That means I'm gonna you.
That's well warmed up. Just for your information, I can still get in and out of my own bathtub. A point of clarification, I've heard mentioned now, we've got this development being built out in West Longview. Land was donated by a church. What is the status of that project now?
I believe they've just finished securing all of the funding needed and are moving through the process of, I think they're hoping to begin the project this year and hopefully have it complete in 2024.
Has a general contractor been chosen yet?
I'm not sure.
No.
To ask housing opportunities.
And that permitting stuff wouldn't come through the county because that's inside the city limits. So that'd be a Longview question. What part of the, yeah, and I don't know if they've issued a declaration of non-significance to avoid an impact statement. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it is in a neighborhood with a lot of apartments, so I imagine there probably wouldn't be that there probably would be a DNS, but I don't know.
So you're of the same vintage as me, so you know Paul Harvey and the rest of the story. So the rest of the story is my discussion with the CEO of the Housing Authority. We had a
Can you
very
get closer to
cordial
the microphone, please?
We had a very cordial discussion following it, and again, the definitions and the things that they have to work within, and our concerns about how our money really gets spent and the return on that money. But there was one discussion. She said, I agree with a lot of things you say, but we have to follow the rules. I said, but we need you to help us push back on the rules. We as individuals can't, but they have opportunity to start pushing a little bit back every time a discussion says on how we rein some of this in. The second story was the one on the Phoenix house. The reason I testified when that money came up was that I had rehabbed a bunch of apartments at the exact same time that Phoenix house was built. My apartments and everything were still in almost pristine condition because I, as the owner, had expectations on the tenants, made them responsible for it, and everything was fine and dandy. It was almost like new condition. But here was the Phoenix house. They're having to spend $700,000 to do repairs and things that should be expectations on tenants and on the maintenance of the facility. And here you coughed up $700,000 of our money to go in and rehab.
Hey.
Hi, welcome back. I hear congratulations are in order.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Grandpa. So I'm I want to talk about this housing issue. So we have the housing that's coming up that's being done by the Presbyterian Church. Only it's from what I was told by one of the church people, it's only for the homeless. So it's kind of like a 2.0 of Hope Village. Am I correct?
I have no idea.
Is that right? Can you hear me now?
Much better.
All right.
I'm not sure if all the units or a portion of the units are designated for certain uses. So to help get people off the street. I
Right.
know that some are set aside for families who are fleeing domestic violence, families with children, those types of things. There are
Okay.
certain set
Okay.
aside.
So I do know that they did make arrangements and qualified for additional Section H vouchers to help subsidize the rent. So
Okay.
that oftentimes is kind of a critical aspect to moving people from homelessness.
So it's subsidized, which we've talked
Oh,
about.
of course.
Which is government housing. Correct?
The Housing Authority is a government agency.
Yes.
Thank you.
So it's so loud. How is it possible? How is it possible to have affordable housing that is not in the hands of the government?
You allow the market to respond, but don't do
Because-
that.
Because why I'm asking, this is really loud. Why I'm asking is because we have, what is that out by Mint Valley? What's that called? Sunset Village or
Sunrise?
Sunrise. So we have Sunrise and we have Campus Towers.
Oh, Sunrise, that's the name for the
Right.
Housing Authority.
We have those two.
But interestingly, if you go on out Ocean Beach Highway, there are a whole bunch of other apartment houses being built.
Yes. And
So-
there, we
and
have
out
some
in-
HUD
out in
ones in
Lexington as well,
Lexington.
right? We
I've
talked
seen them.
about
They're
those.
really nice. I've been inside them. I have friends
So-
that have been there. But in the Highlands, we have these multiplexes that are popping up all over the place. We have 5 on 20th Avenue
New,
at 1,800 a month.
new construction.
Yes.
Okay.
We have one that is on 21st, right across the street, like kitty corner
Mhm.
from our center.
Mhm.
And then over a block, we have one on 22nd that just is popping up. And the thing is, they're not cheap. But they're calling them affordable. So I'm just trying to figure out what do you call affordable housing? What is affordable housing? Can you define that for me? Can you break that down? Does it have to be government housing? Because if I'm not mistaken, and Raylene can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not mistaken, the apartments that are where our old satellite and H&A were meeting, he said he wanted to build affordable housing, brand new apartments. People can now rent there. Not cheap. I think it's 15 to 2,000 a month. How is that affordable housing? Can you define that? Because I'm trying to figure out how this is subsidized. Do we have to go into subsidized housing to have affordable housing? Do we have to have the government's hand in it? Or do we, do you understand my question?
So thank you for asking the question with the hope that we have the answers. We don't have the answers because of what is affordable changes person to person. There is a government standard, which I believe, you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, a measure that one government agency uses ties it into the percentage of family income that goes towards housing. If it's below a certain percentage, that's quote, how affordable. But I think that is 30%, is 30% of your monthly
Right.
income going to housing. Is that's the cutoff for affordable.
'Cause I think-
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think you're right. Some entities go off of, I think, what they call rent burdened. So if you pay so much of your income towards rent, then you're
Mhm.
considered rent burden. And you're right, the term affordable housing gets thrown out a lot.
Right.
And there's federal definitions, there's
Yeah.
definitions that, like housing opportunities has to fall into for the different funding that they access for projects and things like that. I think we probably, in this venue, probably talk about it more broadly in that, we want people to be able to afford their housing
Yeah.
kind of in general. I know Campus Towers, for example, they go off of a sliding fee based on income, right? So
Okay.
it's, the that's how they determine the rent amount, and that's what keeps it affordable. They don't want you to pay, more than you make, so that you're not so rent burdened. So it's a struggle to try to define that term because of the different entities have very strict definitions, and then we sort of talk about it in the community more broadly.
So one interesting example I know of, again, in South Longview, there's about a block, and I seem to think it's around 25th or 26th, I think. But they're rectangles, a whole bunch of rectangular apartment buildings. They're almost all exact. Is Baltimore? Okay, Baltimore
Yeah.
and what's the cross street?
Alder, it's over by Dairy Queen.
So, no, it's down closer to the drainage.
Okay, over by me.
So again, those buildings were actually moved from another location
Okay,
as an alternative,
okay.
inexpensive, low rent. And it has been that way all along. They also look at, I drive by every once in a while, and it's kind of like, not, have they?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's good. So one of the challenges with what's affordable is the maintenance costs. And I would probably defer to a landlord like Ron to kind of give more details. You've got to have a certain amount of income coming in from rents in order to be able to afford the kind of repairs to keep it looking nice.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the management restrictions that he described a little bit earlier. And that's a lot more difficult to do. And you've got about 50 units that you're trying to oversee, I'm thinking. So again, that term of affordability is, again, all in the eye of the beholder. I would bet that those in those pretty modest apartments have made application to the government for vouchers. And the idea is if a landlord accepts vouchers, my understanding has been you are supposed to maintain a certain level. And the Housing Authority was established back in the mid-60s by the city of Longview to combat urban blight. That's their justification. So to avoid the wrecks that can command low rent, but I don't know what the minimum rate is in order to make it a going concern, because plenty of examples where it hasn't worked very well, and we have pretty substandard housing.
But when I think affordable housing, I think of, I like to look along the path where somebody can actually own something.
Yes.
If you're just renting, that's just subsidized housing. And that's what we're talking about here on some of this. And that I don't think does us any good, because there's very little pride of ownership. You see the things you see. Now, can we get to affordable housing? I think we can, but it takes perceptions on people on what they should be able to own. It's going to have to change a little bit, because it's not going to be 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath type thing, right? You can do some cottage type things. You can do things like CAP and Habitat do with people putting some sweat equity in. And we need to try and find a way that we can use some of these funds to help that, where people actually take ownership of stuff. You can have some cottage homes. You can have, there's a development up in Chehalis where a guy put in some cottage homes that are about 500 square feet, but you can own these things and you can have your own little piece of property. But we get in the way as a county, and I've been working with building and planning to see how we can get out of the way. And then we need to have partners that help us with some of the sweat equity and that stuff. But when I talk affordable housing, I want somebody to actually own something. I don't want them to be able to afford rent. I mean, that's nice, but that's just subsidized. That doesn't help those people down the road. It doesn't help your community down the road. And you just don't see the benefits of it. So affordable housing, you look in a book now, there is none. I think we can make some. They're not going to be tens of thousands of them out there, and it's going to come slowly, but I think you can make some progress. But our attitude as a county in helping people do that needs to change a little bit. And consumer's attitude is what I expect has to change a little bit.
I like that idea, and my mom's probably going to tell me to be quiet on this, but my parents disagreed on the fact of how I should attain a car. And I remember that she told me that my father's like, well, we'll give her a car or we'll pay half of the car. And I'm getting to a point on this. My first car, my father went and bought the car because it was the half that he said he would buy. That car ended up getting totaled. I was in a car accident. My second car, I actually paid for. It was money that my mom and my dad had put aside. I took care of that car. I made sure that the car was clean. I always cleaned inside my car. And the reason why I say that is I took care of the car because I paid for the car. My mom went with me. I went car shopping. I took care of the car. I made sure my car payments were paid. And when I think of that, I think of a house. If you're paying a high rent, what if you were paying low payments and you were doing sweat equity with Habitat, or you were doing, I think CAP has a program, and you're doing one of those, then it's a house that you own and you would have more pride in that, knowing that that is mine and you're going to take care of the lawn. You're going to plant your flowers or your garden. You're going to make sure the outside looks nice and you're going to take care of it. You're not going to have a house that's going to be run down. You're not going to sit there and have tenants that are just going to destroy it.
So I'd like to chime in here. We've missed a big issue here.
I know. I was just saying, like, affordable housing has to be more
You don't know
than-
what issue I said.
Okay,
I
go
was going to
ahead.
say.
Go ahead.
For one thing, we're in a situation now where we got into it from bad government intervention over many years. And so it's just like the trucker coming down China Garden. If he gets going too fast, he better use those compression brakes. But he didn't have to get there, but he did. So we are now at a point where we have to start using compression brakes. We approved last year, the year before, something like more than $8 million for rent subsidies.
Right.
As Ron Kozlowski can tell you, he can build a lot cheaper than the government can build. But as a landlord, he doesn't have to compete with what would be a fair market price. His apartment isn't going to go empty because the occupant is going to get all kinds of stuff, including things that you might not think are tied into it. It's all part of a welfare system. There's a EBT card, there's a rental subsidy, and we cannot compete as citizens, cannot compete against the government. That is to say, you will always lose. They got deeper pockets or they got a larger printing press. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot here. Regulations, as my colleague mentioned, he's trying to deal with the regulations. But in the meantime, we're told all kinds of things, and the mores are changed. He addressed that. In 1975, the average new house built was 1,000 fewer square feet than the average new house built in 2010. And we all know that if we were out of the house at 18, we probably had a roommate. We might have had 3 roommates. It just goes on and on. 4 roommates. So how do we undo all this? Well, I'm going to ask at some point, it'll be terribly unpopular. There's still some unspent funds that we have on the rental assistance and the utility assistance. I'm going to ask to stop that. It won't be today, but it might be tomorrow, might be this afternoon. I don't know. Whenever we have an opportunity, we have to stop shooting ourselves in the foot.
So in response to Commissioner Dahl, how do you keep affordable housing in private enterprise?
The microphone.
Okay, thank you. Keep private affordable housing in private enterprise. Number one is that the housing authority with the Section 8, that is privately owned housing that is subsidized. So that's a form, at least the housing remains in private enterprise with the Section 8, or at least those that are being subsidized. Secondly, we have the CBD, the funds that are allocated each year, home funds and CB. Okay. Again, it isn't, you have a whole list of nonprofits to submit their applications for doing that. Private enterprise can also submit their applications, but again, they're burdened. They don't have the grant writers. They don't have everything that the nonprofits that we're paying for on their staff to do the grant writing.
It's worse than that. We are forced to go through CAP.
Correct. So as an example was that, again, you can go back to it. I and Wendy challenged the system in the city of Longview 10 years ago now, when we got CBD funds, $7,000 a unit for 7 units to rehab them. Okay, that's pittance these days. That's out practically a month's worth of rent. But the condition was we kept affordable housing or affordable housing rates for 5 years in order to get our $7,000 a unit with a hell of a lot of sweat equity going in mixed with it. But we proved that it could be done and that private enterprise could compete with the nonprofits. Your opportunity is to see if there are some other private enterprises that want to compete for these funds, the same way that go before the cities and before the county for your allocation of funds. Thirdly, you know, on Camp Alabama, the costs that the city of Longview is presenting, wanted from you and from the community, is $2.5 million for the entire enterprise. Salvation Army's contract alone is $1.1 million. So just put that as constituents make other comments.
If I could, I just wanted to add, we are having some conversation tomorrow afternoon about a new RFP or new request for proposals, and we would welcome, you know, competition through that process from a variety of entities.
And that's why you have to jack up and kind of help private enterprise get interested, because they'll be much more efficient.
I just want to,
Yeah, it is.
I just want to say, back in the 70s, I lived in subsidized housing. The unit, the complex I lived in, I can't remember how many there were of us, 40 or 50. I was one of 3 people that paid 25% of my rent, and my rent was $245. I made about $900 at the time, a month. Other people were paying 35, some were paying 0, some paid 100. But our apartment was nice and we took care of it. I was a single mom and it helped me at the time. So I don't have a real issue with subsidized housing. However, in this day, today, if I did not have my retirement from the state, I would be paying half my Social Security and my rent, half. And my landlord is one that tends to keep his rents as low as he possibly can. I paid $500 for like 5 or 6 years, and everybody around him was just so angry because he was not charging exorbitant rent for his spaces. So I think that there are ways that they can do this. I think some of the things you're talking about, some of the things Ron's talked about, I think there's ways it can be happening, but I don't necessarily disagree that we can use subsidized housing because it helped me in a time when I needed it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I do want to make note of the time. We have this motion to dispose of. We have 2 other items on the agenda, and we still need to get to public comment. So we want to wrap this up while it's still morning. At any rate, any other comments on the proposal before us to approve the 2 housing requests?
A quick comment in general. When you make things easy, you actually make it hard to discern who of the 100 applicants are the ones that really need help or you would really like to help. And that is a monumental problem. I can do examples, but I've been asked to be brief, so I'll be brief. Stop.
And I'll be brief too. Was there ever a time government had a successful housing program? I can show you a picture taken in the South Pacific with two Marines in a foxhole. One of them had my last name, and out in front on a ration box, it said FHA approved during the monsoon season. So you had indoor hot, mainly cold running water,
But it was a bathtub.
especially when the artillery hit.
Yeah.
But come on, Commissioner Weber, you were a civics teacher. That development out there that bordered Alabama and Industrial Way, those were surplus houses from the Tongue Point Naval Station.
Is that what it was? Okay.
They're over 80 years old. And another source was the Vanport project. Matter of fact, one of my relatives bought one and moved it clear to Longview.
Post flood? After the flood?
After the flood in 48. Of course, you could float it down the river on a barge, as they did the Tongue Point. But yes, in those instances, and a gentleman brought up barracks, they work too, and you'll have a lot of close roommates, about 36 to a bay. But the other public housing that works is that sweat equity, because there's a development up in Castle Rock that I watched being built, mainly young people in the service industry. They provided their own tools, and then they had a loan that they had to pay off, and they had to meet certain specifications. And the only other one is what they call the land donation claim during the Civil War, which I live on. Of course, you had to fight the guys in the gray uniforms, and yeah, if you were single, you got 160 acres, but you had to stay on it for 5 years and prove it up. And I live in the exact same house to this day. It's 150 years old.
It's a neat story. I know in West Longview, they had, during the Depression, they had the Homesteads Project, where houses were provided. I think they were minimum 2-acre lots, which is why those CVG lots are so deep.
It was called Columbia Valley Gardens.
Right.
And one of your co-teachers, Dave Jides, grew up in it.
And the requirement was to have a cow because they wanted it to be self-sufficient eventually and grow your own food. And but it was a subsidized housing project. And many of those houses still exist. But ultimately, it didn't continue because it was very expensive and for the handful of families that benefited. And that's always the challenge. I mean, the government does it, it's going to be more expensive. It shouldn't be. I also am pretty familiar with the sweat equity programs. The local agency there are 2 local agencies that have been involved in sweat equity type projects. And one of them was mentioned on the chat, and that is Habitat for Humanity. They do a great program building homes and having people invest time if they can't afford much of a down payment. And then CAP was the one that did the one up in Castle Rock, and they've done about 3 programs, and they've gotten out of that business because the development costs of subdivisions are so complex that they're doing individual home rehabilitations, and I think we help contribute some of the monies for that too.
Which former president talks the talk and walks the walk for Habitat for Humanity?
The former governor from Georgia, isn't it?
Former Annapolis.
Yeah. Billy's big brother. Any other comments on the motion before us? All right, let's go ahead and proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve both requests as presented by staff, say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion carries. Now we're going to jump over to items 25 and 26 from the auditor's office. We have representatives from the auditor's office here. Probably will be able to answer all of our questions, right? Amy and Brooke. The first agreement is with a CPA, Teresa Johnson. Amy, are you doing the honors this morning?
Actually, Brooke is the subject matter expert on this
Okay,
one. We're going to let her
sorry.
take the
Okay.
lead.
Thank you. Brooke,
Yeah, so this is
go ahead. Brooke, go ahead and introduce yourself for the audience, please.
I am Brooke Poor. I'm the accounting manager in the auditor's office. So today we are requesting approval for a professional service agreement with Teresa Johnson's office. She provides consulting and preparation services and assists our office in preparing our annual financial statements.
And the request is up to $34,350
Correct.
for this year's contract, right?
Correct.
And the date is listed as 2022.
The period ending last year?
Yeah, so we're preparing right now our 2022 financial statements, which are due to the state auditor's office at the end of May.
And
This doesn't work.
so she's doing the work now, reviewing the books from
She's
last
doing the
year.
work now, but so our contract with Teresa Johnson is now, not.
Right, but it's to cover the period ending
Oh, is
in
that what-
December. Yeah, that is a little bit misleading. Normally, when we get these, we get the effective time for whatever contract it
Oh,
is.
got it. Okay, yeah.
Okay, but they have it phrased a little bit differently.
Okay.
Good catch. Rick, were you gonna have a question?
No, go ahead.
So I do have a question. Why do we hire an outside CPA? Other government entities don't necessarily do that.
So she helps us with preparing part of the financial statements themselves. We do prepare a majority of the work in-house in the auditor's office. She also is there to help us with consulting services. We have a new GASB standard we're implementing this year regarding leases. And then she also does a big review of our financial statements. The state auditors always ask how our statements are reviewed each year, and we rely on her services to do that independent review.
But, okay. We haven't always had her though, have we? It seems
As far
like-
as I've been here, we have used her services. Amy might be able to give a better timeline. She's been here longer than I have.
She has been here longer than I have too. So over 7 years, we've been using her services. It is the independent review part. I think that's the most important, that separation of duties.
So, I may have the process or the timeline a little bit wrong. It seemed to me that we first went to her when the auditor's office no longer had a CPA on staff. The argument was because we don't have a CPA on staff, we need to hire a CPA to go through this update with the GASB and all those kinds of things. Now, we had one and then he came to our office but now we have two. So my question is, now that we have CPAs in the auditor's office, why do we need an outside consultant? Don't we have the expertise to do all of those things?
I think in the past, we've also had 2 accountants. I can't say exactly the time frame, but she does work with us on helping us prepare certain schedules for our statements that we've always relied on her to do, even when we've had 2. We have cut back a lot on her services over the years, but we still do rely on her for some of the work.
Thank you. Those are the questions that I had. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agreement with Teresa D. Johnson, CPA, as has been discussed.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I will vote no. The motion does pass 2-1. Number 20, item number 26. a grant from the Secretary of State's office, I believe. Who's?
So, I'm Amy Filippello, Chief Deputy Auditor in the Auditor's Office, and with me is Brandy Coolias, and she's going to take the lead on this as the subject matter expert. I do want to clarify that this is not a grant. It is a continuation of a project that did begin several years ago with a grant, but it is not a grant. And I will turn that over to Brandy.
Great, welcome, Brandy.
Hello, how are you?
Great.
So today I'm just presenting to you a statement of work that we have. This is statement of work number 4. As Amy stated, it's a continuation of digitizing our records so they are able to be viewed online. And this is an ongoing project, and I'm hoping that we can continue with this work so we're able to provide these images for our customers and the public.
So Brandy, our agenda title mentions a cost, $57,550. Is that what your office is paying to do this? Or does that?
Yes, it's out of our O&M fund. For our O&M fund, we're supposed to be using this money for digitization and preservation of our records. It's not to exceed $57,550.
So that's coming from the general fund or whatever's in your office, or does this come from the Secretary of State's office?
These funds actually come from the auditor's O&M fund, from monies that we collect from recorded documents, and they can only be used for document preservation and retention.
And so the agreement is between the county and the Secretary of State's office to facilitate to utilize their services?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. The wording was a little bit unclear to me anyway. Other questions for staff?
So is this getting, is this for stuff from present, or are we getting, do we have a lot of stuff in history that we're trying to get digitized?
That is
that where we're
correct.
at?
That is correct. We are working from books A to present. We currently have images from the early 1980s to present. We also have some images before 1980s that are also digitized, but we're just starting from the very beginning and working to present.
Okay. When this part is done, how close are we going to be to being done, do you think?
Oh, when this statement of work is done?
Yeah.
We still have a long ways. What we're doing currently right now is not just digitizing, we're having the records indexed, so they're searchable. So that's what's taking a little bit of time because they were handwritten back then. So the closer we get to maybe like in the 70s, 60s, we have more readable information, so we can index faster. So the job should go quicker. But the older books, they're very delicate and they have a lot of, cursive and special writing.
So let's say, just as a hypothetical, somebody wants to do some research on water rights that they might have with their property. Is that available in your office?
Well, it depends on the search criteria. We would need to know if they have a grantor, if they have a grantee. We would definitely research what we can. And if we can't, we try to help the customer get it through archives, or we actually give the information to the customer to contact archives.
So the original document would be archived in Olympia, probably if it's really old, say like around 1900. And, but it's probably been digitalized, which means it can be come up on a screen, say in your office, or a title company could get access to that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Gee, Commissioner Weber, were you referring to a certain person in the room?
Well, I
When
didn't
you
really
say-
refer to him, but the issues came up and I know that has been an issue trying to find. You had mentioned that we don't have.
You
the
don't.
records, So,
And nobody knows where they are. Now, I started.
Have you met the
research-
auditor? Have you made an appointment to speak to Carolyn
I've-
Funding Landing?
I've started, I believe, with Gertrude Rivers, went to Darlene DeRozier, and then through Christy Swanson. Now, we go back to Sarah Ivy, who was the auditor during the war, because she was the one that signed my dad and his two brothers' DD 214s, because her stamp is on that. And that was a separate ledger. God knows where it is now, because there's just a bunch of county employees in that vault. And I guess I should save this for public comment. But going back to anybody that wanted to research, thank God that the original pioneer, whose place I live on, he didn't trust government. So he had a big safe with all the original deeds, and they're still in Cowlitz County. And he didn't trust Washington Territory. He went over to Oregon to file all his legal paper. Again, Oregon saves the day, but Washington drops the ball. Now, luckily, when they still had ledger books with all the filings and the file number, I went through before wherever the documents went, and I took photocopies of everything. Now, I believe I heard the auditor's employee said they started with 1980 to the present. Well, even some of those documents were put on microfiche or microfilm. But the worst ones that aren't there were the survey records, which were required to be recorded by the Surveyor and Recording Act of 1974. Now, you really need the original ones because there are some places in this county you don't want to set foot in because the surveys are so screwed up, nobody can figure out anything. And it makes it doubly problematic when all the corrections in a township are made in section 36. And guess where my property is? Next, and that was designated state land along with section 16. So, and then you have all the trades. Thank God the pioneer who was the second owner of my place, like I said, he didn't trust government. So he kept all his own records, federal and state. And a matter of fact, the original landowner was a territorial Cowlitz County commissioner. He didn't trust government either. He wasn't a Republican, he was a German. So I'm familiar with, I saw the original file books. I believe that was under Darlene. And then Christie started digitalizing. But the original records, I went to the vault and you had to sign in to get into the vault. And then you left all the materials out for the county clerk or the clerk employee to refile them so they weren't misplaced. But you got to really wear a body camera to hear some of the answers from county and state of employees. It's like, what planet are you on?
all right, thank you. Tim?
So, is your name Brandy? I can't really read it up there.
Yes,
So
Brandy.
I'm curious about the digitization process. Do you like just take papers, put them in a scanner and then, like I do at home? Or is there some, I'm not trying to imagine this process that's seems to go on forever, right?
Brandy, can you describe for us that digitization process?
So we don't digitize. Are you talking about the old records being digitized?
Yeah, well, that's what you've been talking about here. and
Right.
It just kind of raised a point of curiosity for me. I'm just curious about the process. What does this mean? Digitization? I can't even say it.
Digitization, it is a
Yeah.
complicated word. So the state archives, what they do is they try to get a clear image off of the microfilm because they don't want to handle the books if it's not necessary because they're fragile. So then they take that information off of the image, off of the microfilm, and they digitize. They get information, they make sure it looks good, looks presentable, readable, legible. And then what they do is they take that information and out of, not literally, but they pull information and they index records. They index the records. They pull out the grantor, the grantee, the parcel number. That is the process. If they have to grab the actual book or document, they will do so if the microfilm is not a good quality. For us, present, what we do is we scan the document in, we make sure that it is reproducible, it's legible, and then we index it, and then we either give it back to the customer or we send it back to the submitter.
So you do put it in a scanner.
Here we do, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
right. And then that information goes up to the state, is that right? And then
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
digitize it.
No, we already digitized it because we have scanned it in present day. We're talking about present day records. We scan them in and we digitize it there. And we upload to the state. So it's available in different avenues. You can look at it through Washington State Digital Archives, or you can look at it through the auditor's web public record search. So it's the past digitization that we're talking about today.
Okay.
That we're requesting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, the documents that we sent to state archives were our hard copy old documents that they already have on microfilm, and they're using the microfilm to make an electronic image for us to put on our website. The documents that we scan are the newer documents since we've had a recording system, a digital recording system in place from the 90s or so forward. Those are the ones that actually go through a physical scanner and then are uploaded to state archives. It's kind of two different projects.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
Yeah, and
Kinda working
part
at
of
it
the
from both
reason,
directions.
yeah, part of the reason for it's taking so long is we received a grant back in, I believe it's 2018 or 19 for the first portion of this project. We received a $50,000 grant from the Secretary of State's office. They began the project, and then COVID came and the state of Washington sent all of their employees home, and that project was shelved for 2 years or so. And so they've just picked it back up this last year. Otherwise, we could maybe be done by now. Trust us, we all want it to be done by now. That is the auditor's goal, is to have every recorded document on our website available for the public to search free of charge. That's the goal.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agreement for document preparation and image services at a cost not to exceed $57,550.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion carries. Citizen comments now for items not on the agenda. We do have one hand up. Let's go with I guess Darcy is left with us. Darcy, welcome
Hello.
back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for allowing me to share some of these things that have come to light since the discussion about the denial of the grant to the homeowner in West Longview. One citizen had kind of a knee-jerk response to the commissioner's decision, saying that that there was all sorts of oversight and that the decision was insane. and accusing the commissioners of inefficiency and wasting everyone's time, but I'm finding that almost the opposite set of problems has come to light because of this case. Within the county departments, there seems to be very limited oversight and some gross miscommunication. First of all, the parcel in question is historically prone to flooding. A quick glance at the county epic map shows that on the next road over at 429 Hooper Road, there's an area of wetlands that's uphill and to the west of the subject property. And a natural drainage is clearly visible on that map as well, that flows from the wetland area downslope through 2 parcels and leads directly to the subject's driveway. There's both a non-fish bearing stream as well as a fish bearing stream on the Abernathy parcel. And according to the epic map, a majority of that parcel is marked as a floodplain. The home was built by the homeowner's in-laws, and the current homeowner was quitclaim deeded the property for $10 in 2002 and filed a homestead declaration in 2005. On the 1974 septic drawing, the location of her driveway and along the road frontage, the words natural drainage is written. The same area is noted as man-made drainage on the 1970s proposed home and garage permit drawing. Also, the 1990 additional garage permit notes that there is a raised planting area built in the natural drainage, and much of the parcel is in the floodplain. Even the more recent August of 2014 plumbing permit, the words natural drainage appears to be in the homeowner's own handwriting. These multiple references establish that it is accepted that drainage, at least seasonally, inundates this location. The driveway has also been problematic for decades. In Stepankowski's editorial piece, he called Ideology Once Again Trumps Compassion. It says the county did repair the damage when the same problem washed out her driveway in 2008. Now, this would indicate that the driveway has been prone to washout for decades. Also, the homeowner has referenced her driveway issues in some Google reviews. In 2019, she said about Spencer's gravel delivery, we had issues with our driveway. One of the owners came out to our home, checked it out, gave his recommendation, which we followed. They delivered a load of rock with a team of their guys who are extremely helpful and fast. Our driveway has never looked so good. So again, she's, it's been an ongoing problem that's been realized. Also, speaking of reviews, just 5 months ago, the homeowner revealed in a review of a plumbing outfit that she had a leaking exterior pipe. And, one would wonder, did this contribute to some of the flooding problem? So what can the taxpayers of Cowlitz County do to protect themselves from being forced to subsidize the lifestyles of those who are fortunate enough to have a beautiful waterfront home, but are unwilling to take the responsibility for the risks involved? Is building and planning requiring developers to adequately mitigate problems at the building sites? And speaking of this place, I was thinking, if the drainage on the neighboring parcels is tampered with, would it cause even a worse calamity, like a landslide, instead of just occasionally washing out a portion of the driveway? But in addition to the problems of this specific parcel, I'm seeing that we are suffering from inter-county department communication problems, because when the director proposed this grant at the meeting, he said that the grant was to repair a walkway from the property line to the house that had been washed away. And he also said it washed out a concrete and gravel walkway. But referring to that Stepankowski article again, he said that it was a private gravel driveway off of Abernathy Creek Road. So it's not clear, was it a driveway or was it her walkway? And according to the presenter, Director Schnabler, the department had photos and they had 3 estimates and an invoice copy, but none of these copies were available for review during that meeting that I saw. He also said the resident qualified for the criteria of maximum household income and that she was disabled. My question there is how is the income of the requesters determined? Is documentation and verification required? And what are the requirements for disability qualification? This information was not included in the presentation at all. So I called Mr. Schnabler. Well, actually, first when I commented, he answered my question about was this a reimbursement, was the work already done? He says yes, but she has other damages she's not repaired yet. She only had it repaired that she could get into her house. And I thought that did not lay with the fact that the grant is given in the form of a reimbursement. So there's also a problem with the public notification, because when the director said that he had done this press release to the Daily News, and that they had a great representation, a great penetration, I guess is what he said, through the 25,000 members of his Facebook page. And he was pretty satisfied that it could reach 105,000 residents of the county. So after the meeting, I went on to find the post and I couldn't find it. So I called him and he said, oh, I misspoke at that meeting. There was no social media outreach. So I asked him for an application form for the grant to review, and he sent me a link via email, and only the first page of the application is visible. You have to fill it out in order to see the next page, and I'm not going to fill out a false application. So I called the agency involved and they said, no, you have to go through your county. So it just kind of gets me going around in a circle there. So, but my point is, notifications of this type must be made available to all of the county residents, and notice to the public as well between the county departments needs to be addressed. And I say that because I understand at the same time, the lady's trying to get this grant. She was a recipient of another state grant program. Oh no, that came prior. Okay, let me tell you about the prior grant. She was a recipient of another state program grant in the form of a forgivable loan of $25,000, and it was attached to her property as a reducing lien over a period of 10 years. She applied for the money in 2018 and received it in 2019. And in 2020, the grantee appealed to the county to forgive the lien in order that she could obtain refinancing of her home and tap $100,000 equity. And unbelievably, the county granted her request, putting the public's money in peril of default for the benefit of just one individual. In 2021, she asked for another permission to refinance and tapped another $12,000. And so to this, I say, why bother with putting liens on the properties if the county authority is not going to use it to protect the public assets? You know, why not just make unsecured loans to individuals? I understand that during the time she was applying for this natural disaster grant, the homeowner had filed a claim against the Cowlitz Public Works Department, asserting that the county was responsible for the storm damage that made her driveway impassable, and that the Public Works Department was unresponsive. Public Works had retained the call logs and photographic evidence that disproves all facets of this claim. In fact, the Public Works Department resorted to requesting a deputy to intervene at one point when the homeowner was creating an unsafe situation and would not allow the workers to do their job. An outside agency, which I guess, I don't know how it works exactly, but I guess it's like some kind of a county risk pool among different agencies, determined that this claim was was just unfounded. So what can be done to improve the communication and to promote the good stewardship of public property among our county's departments? Shouldn't all of these departments defer communications with a claimant, especially to the county attorney when there's a claim or an active investigation against the county? That's the way I understand anytime I've had to hire a lawyer, that's kind of what they say. So a major factor, though, that may prompt us to agree on the need for the grant on an emotional level is disability, but what is the nature of the disability? Yeah, I wouldn't, be so bold as to assume that a person suffers from no handicap just from their outward appearance alone, but what are the parameters of a disability that would require a grant of public funds to repair a longstanding issue and possibly even a self-created issue? Why would we need to use, at what point do we need to use public funds to pay for that? Would an emotional disability fall into this category, for instance? Because the beautiful property that this person has on Abernathy Road would be a very challenging home for a physically disabled person to reside in. There's no handicap accommodations apparent in any of the pictures of the house. The concrete walkway has several steps on each end, 5 curving steps at the bottom and 2 near the door. There are no handrails. The basement garage entrance would require ascending an interior staircase, and there's a 3rd entrance at the rear of the home with steps leading to a wooden deck. The driveway, you can see in the pictures, is undulating and has a gravel surface, and the grounds are largely natural kind of vegetation, unlevel, riparian kind of terrain. So, I looked at her Facebook. A quick peek shows that a May 2020 video of her enjoying a sandy beach. Great. That's great. There's no wheelchair in sight or mobility device evident. There's multiple photos of her and her partner or caregiver enjoying many activities like dancing and visiting a pumpkin patch, a fruit orchard, standing on a yacht deck or a ferry deck, whatever that was, and taking photos at their rocky stream bank. And again, no mobility devices visible in any photos. So thankfully, the homeowner seems to have experienced an incredible recovery from a spinal cord injury in 2010. I see that she has expressed surprise and gratitude in at least 5 comments, posts, or reviews online from 2012 to 2020, where she thanks and credits her recovery to associate members of the business that she works for as a researcher. That's called Trivetti Global Incorporated. So the question regarding all that is, are there established standards regarding the publicly provided accommodations for the disabled on their private property? And what are the minimal requirements for the county to issue a property tax exemption for the disabled? For instance, is a doctor's report required? Are there updated reports required in case a person regains their ability to work? And are the exemptions ever reversed in the case of a physical recovery? Does the assessor follow up on the cases, or are we counting on the taxpayers to self-report on these circumstances? So these are just some of the questions that came up from this. You just never know what kind of can of worms is going to open from just a simple agenda item on these meetings. But I'm seeing a lot of questions that I have now regarding our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll add on that. The one thing that I had mentioned earlier was when you have programs where essentially you're handing out free hot dogs, the demand for free hot dogs from all kinds of people will essentially crowd out the 1 or 2 hungry people that are trying to avail themselves of a hot dog. So here you've outlined a lot of interesting stuff that just sort of suggests that we are at a disadvantage. We, the public, are at a disadvantage if we, as the custodians, don't do a full and thorough job on the matter. And I accept your admonishment.
Next, Mr. Samuels. Make sure you unmute.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Wow. More pontificating from the Social Security and Medicare recipients. That was kind of a troubling report there, stalkerish. Anyhow, 2 weeks ago, Commissioner Weber, it's good to see you back. 2 weeks ago, it was quite troubling to observe Commissioner Mortensen offer up Cowlitz County employees for cross-examination from misinformed members of the public who had concocted aspersions and false allegations about the public's access to archived property records. That's kind of a long sentence. Sorry about that. It was clearly a rehearsed stunt that showed how truly unserious Commissioner Mortensen is. And then it happened again over facility change orders and outside contracts for attorneys. If constituents have concerns about access to the county archives or fairground light fixtures and their lumen capacities, or the public defender's office's practices and how they organize their caseload, the commissioners should look into the matters themselves, carrying those grievances and concerns, and then report back to the respective constituents personally and privately, instead of making county employees waste their valuable time bantering with breathtakingly uninformed members of the public who just want to armchair quarterback and stick it to the man. It seems to me that if you want to lose good and competent county employees, and I think that's something you all should be paying attention to, making them impromptu public punching bags for aggrieved malcontents is a very effective motivator for them to update their resumes. Also, I don't believe Commissioner Dahl has publicly apologized for cowardly defaming Chris Swanson earlier this month. Until he does, I will continue to bring the matter up. He says he isn't afraid of anything, but clearly he's afraid to right that wrong. And finally, are Commissioners Dahl and Mortensen going to personally foot the bill for any lawsuits the county might face from their grandstanding stunt with the County Board of Health last week? We are not paying you, gentlemen, $86,000 a year to stick your finger in the state's chest and grandstand on your depraved, stances. So please do better. Thank you. Be well.
Thank you. Anyone? I think one person was approaching. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Just figured if I was the last one talking, I might as well grab my purse. So I haven't been to these meetings in a while, but I just wanted to say as a school board member and a
Actually, you need to bring it the other way.
this way.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
God,
right
that's
closer
loud.
to you. Yeah.
So I just want to bring up because as a school board member and as a mom that volunteers with the foster care community in Wahkiakum counties, that I want to say thank you for you guys looking into housing our foster care population and our unattended minors, because Longview School District alone has over 200. Kelso School District has over 200. I believe there's like over 500 in Cowlitz County alone. And I'm very thankful that you guys are looking into a higher homeless population and serving people that actually can't help themselves. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, it is.
Well, when it comes to deriding county employees, I think in this session, I just complimented most all the Cowlitz County auditors going back to Sarah Ivy. So I don't know where that gentleman got his comments, but each is entitled to his own opinion in the United States, maybe. But I didn't come here for Jake Bakes or public water systems. We talk about grants, and I think the best example of a grant was another former elected official, Dean Taco, who was county assessor, and more exemplary member was Ray Ryan. He's probably the most elected official I had the utmost respect for, because he was helpful in his office. He made everything available to the general public, and he was never dishonest. And he had an exemplary military record from private to full colonel, which is almost unheard of. But we talk about grants just for a little while. And my late father hated them in education because they were never specific. And if you couldn't do it within the school district, he didn't want to go outside of it, because God knows, it wasn't curriculum specifically for the local area. And if you got a grant, you had to do things that you didn't want to. God forbid you had any leftover money to give back. But how ridiculous it gets, unfortunately, here's the Longview School District. New playground equipment for all. And it came from emergency COVID-19 money. We got to use it up or they'll take it back. But the key word here is emergency. Playground equipment is an emergency. Is there a contradiction in terms there? You know, like you got to eat your vegetables before you can have dessert, right? Like having enough sandbags if Mount St. Hole in the ground burps again. That's an emergency. But getting back to my specific comment was recording fees. And lo and behold, the Fourth Estate came through. And I didn't know about your new information system because I don't get KLTV out in the rural areas of the county. And somebody called me up at 3 a.m. in the morning and he goes, Steve, I think the commissioners and the auditor are talking about you. And this was at the January 16th meeting after I made my first comments. And I believe the auditor at present was going through, well, you know, the vault isn't fireproof. And I thought back because I used to cover this area when I got out of school in '85 for District 2 at headquarters. And between 1923 and the present, and it's gone through 3 renovations since then. And Christy Swanson gave me a guided tour after the last renovation when you were earthquake proofed. And she showed the vault and all the improvements they made on the last, and they had an expert in concrete, Jerry Rieger, because in the 39 edition, which went south, WPA project by a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And you'll never guess who told us to go through all the public buildings and see the brass plaques. Larry Wagle. And there's one on the Long Gym. There's one at the City Hall. There's one at the Kessler Auditorium. There used to be one at the Kelso City Hall. And you have one out here, and there's a cornerstone for the Longview Post Office. And they're all excellent buildings. Even this one, which anyway, I believe the auditor said, well, they were vandalizing the records. Well, that's why Christy had a sign-in sheet. She had one of her clerks, you know, take our information. And then when we left the vault, we signed out and we left all the articles that we were looking at on the tables so a county employee could refile them. So the current auditor was wrong on that part. I went through a lot of the documents and even the microfilm and the survey maps, and I never saw any vandalism. Well, that was I believe it was January 16th when you had this information system on KLTV. So I stayed up to 3 a.m. and watched it. I had to come into Longview for that. But the thing that got me was the recording fees. And this, you got to hand it to the Daily News, and I don't say that very often. It's a very detailed breakdown of the recording fees. The thing that bothers me the most, oh, well, the state sets the recording fees. Well, they were, like I said, when I filed the first document, which was a power of attorney, it was $65. Well, then they, in this article, Sunday, January 22nd, the fee through a state surcharge went up to $103. And then in 2021, they had another $100 surcharge. And now we're looking at $203.50, but it gets even worse than that. When you look at the filing fees you have on the window and a survey map filing fee, which I had here. This is what you have on the reader board down there in front of the auditor's office. And for a first page of a survey, plot, short plat, condos, etc., $287.50. This is like mission creep in the military. And it's like the auto tab creep, and the state took care of Tim Eyman. He can never have an initiative again. Remember how ridiculous those tabs got? $400 when I came back to Washington for a used car that was only worth $1,200. Well, anyway, here's technology. This was what was put on a record. It was a Xerox machine. I believe when I went to school, it was 5 cents and it went up to 10 cents. And now you have it listed here at 15 cents. Well, here comes the digital age, compact disc. And at the county clerk's office over at the courthouse across the river, this used to be $10. Well, technology moved on. We have a flash drive or zip drive. This is one of the counties. Cost me, I believe, $15 at the county clerk's office over on the 3rd floor or 2nd floor. And it's a record of a court case I wanted to look at. And it's powered by a program called The Record. It don't work. Well, bring it over and we'll try it. It didn't work at the court clerk's office. I took it to a friend of mine at Intel, who's a lot smarter about things like this than me. Guess what? It didn't work. And they're still using the same software. And this is a cheap zip drive, but it should work. But it doesn't. But it cost me $15. Now the current per page, paper page, I believe is 15 cents in the auditor's office. And they mentioned the surcharge in the duties of the county auditor. And there's only one part I want to read. Duties of the auditor. And the old man, and I can call myself that now. I go up to Jim Lamont and I go, how's that make you feel when your students are 60 years old now? He looks better than I do. This is item number 1. The county auditor shall be the recorder of deeds and other instruments in writing, which by law are to be filed and recorded. Here's the important word: in and for the county for which he or she is elected. Now, I don't recall electing the state legislature in Cowlitz County, do you?
Only 6 of them.
Only 6? Well, they're still not the auditor, are they? So now we've got $200 a page and then $287 a page for a survey, and they're not here. And when the clerk next to the door of the old vault says, well, they're not here because, and that's why you got to wear a body cam, because you can't believe some of the answers. Well, the state is a lot better at keeping records. So you go up to the state archives, which I did, I've been there before, and same state employee, and I go, can I view the records of Cowlitz County? Well, we don't know where they are. They're in some warehouse somewhere. 200 and how many dollars for that? And you still don't get the record. And if you do, it don't work. That's all I have.
A question for you. Do you intend on trying to meet the auditor and get down to brass tacks with the auditor?
Well, it's all right here, Commissioner Mortensen, and the records aren't there because she's used the space to install more county employees. And the clerk of the office said the records were sent to the state archives.
That is correct, but I'm very concerned about the loss of any document. And so you've been around enough basically to know that you're looking all over the place for your eyeglasses and they turn out to be on your head. I want to be sure that you, facing the auditor, we uncover if there is a problem. At the moment, I hear your side. I'd like to hear her side. I'd like to see it side by side. We get, well, let me call pejoratively, accusations all the time, and it just.
That's why I say you really got to wear a body camera because I don't believe what I'm hearing. Now, I'm going to go back up to the city. That's a tribute to Murphy's Law because I have to attend another meeting up there. And they use the old Thurston County Courthouse, which is right by the state archives. And I'll go in there and maybe I'll wear my body camera so you can hear what this state employee told me about county records. And I did get a phone number from the county employee, and she's the clerk closest to the old vault door.
I see Amy is on the camera. Amy, you want to comment?
I just wanted to address the gentleman's concerns. We are more than happy to help him find a document down in this office. If the document was 1984 or newer, we will definitely be able to pull it from our own records. If not, we can definitely help him work with the state archives to get that record until the images are finished. And I'll go a little further in saying that our auditor has a very open door policy. She welcomes the public. She would be more than happy to show you around or discuss the issue with you. If you do have a problem, we want to address it for sure. She did have our licensing and recording manager reach out to you, sir, through letter and asking you to make an appointment with Brandy to come in, and Brandy can help you find your document as well.
Now, this isn't my first rodeo. If you have the auditor registration number, if you have the parcel number, if you have the court case number, you can go right there. But I've seen with my own eyes, you have nothing but county employees in that vault now, and I know the material that I was looking for isn't there. I can see it with my own eyes. And when one of your own clerks tells me that they've already sent it up to the state archives, I don't, and you requested the letter, I believe, on the June 16th, whatever that KLT broadcast was. There's no point in meeting the auditor because there's nothing in that vault anymore.
Okay, so there's no physical record in the vault, but all of those images we can create digitally. We can print one out for you.
From 1980 to present, correct?
At this point, that is what we have available in our office.
These were all before that concerning water rights and right-of-ways and whatnot. And
that's why,
thank God I kept the auditor's file numbers and the deed numbers, grantors, grantors. Like I said, I was trained in legal research, so it's not my first rodeo, but when you want me to meet with the auditor, when I know there's nothing in the vault, what's the point?
Yeah, but nothing in the vault is, to me, at this point in time, in this age, a meaningless statement. It could, for example, be in a CD stuck in the vault, and you'd say it's empty. You want a piece of paper, and she'll print you a piece of paper.
That is correct. A lot of those things we have on Laserfish as well. Surveys get a little trickier because they're indexed by section, township, and range. So we'd have to go through a list of things. And that's why Brandy Coolius, the licensing and recording manager, reached out to you via letter to invite you to come in so she could assist you.
Yeah, but let me drive it back. You're talking about older documents, are we not?
Actually, the actual filing ledger, which I believe Darlene showed me, and that was real helpful, and that's way before 1980.
And the general index, we do have that digitized, so we would be able to look at that.
Have you digitized since Cowlitz County became, what's the term? Not accredited county, but since Cowlitz County, since Washington became a state, since Cowlitz County became the county, and have you got the records that go that far back?
Yeah, we don't have hard copy records, but we do have images of all of those records. They're on microfilm. We can get them for you.
Which you were digitalizing under Christy Swanson. Some of them were digitalized, not a whole lot, but I went through the microfilm, and that's, you sent that off to a private contractor for scanning, I believe. Right?
That was before my time. I'm not sure.
It's on the bottom, Laser, power, when you do a search on the internet.
Oh, Laserfish.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the company you sent all the documents to, right?
Laserfish is a repository that the county controls.
Okay. And is it on a cloud? Is it on a server? Where is it?
It's on a server, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, bottom line, the vault's empty and the state archives doesn't know where the records for Cowlitz County are.
And the state archives, if you call and make an appointment with them, they will definitely find those documents. They just need to know what to look for.
Yeah, but here, if I could interject, it's
bet.
really up to us, in my opinion, to husband his request through, because we are responsible for those things, and we should not just pass the buck over and say, well, you go up to Olympia. If he goes up to Olympia, we should be absolutely certain he's going to walk in the door and get exactly what it is he needed.
And I believe we can help him here in our office.
And I
even think
do
it's
have
necessary.
a body camera, and when I have to go up next month, I'll get you the exact response from the state employee. Because what floored me, I got the same response here. They're no longer here in the vault. And I go up there and, well, we don't know where they're at. They're in some warehouse somewhere.
Yeah, you've spoken a lot of truth earlier in other testimony. I wish we could have a little better
Steve,
response
Steve,
for
if you do plan on going up there, contact them ahead of time with the information so they can have it for you when you get there. They just need time. They can't respond if you walk in. But because
Well, and you're also dealing with, okay, you had the microfiche, you had the partial, it was very thin digitalization under Christy Swanson. And the most voluminous records were the bound ledgers on the different levels.
those are gone.
And they were the most interesting.
They were.
But luckily, I knew something like this might happen. So I spent a hell of a lot of money copying everything. So I have parcel numbers, I have grantors, grantees. Some of the information was on somebody else's deeds. And of course, you have case numbers if you're in court records, and then you have the file numbers of the auditor. And if you have all those, then you're pretty much set. But they're not here. The physical records aren't here, and God knows where they are up in the state archives.
All right. Thank you. It is 10 minutes to 1. We have a 1:30 meeting. We need a lunch break. I'll either adjourn this meeting or we'll go into recess for 40 minutes.
It's the same login, isn't it?
Same login, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to leave the meeting.
And
That's
we'll-
appropriate.
And we will
isn't
come
it?
back.
Look at the clerk. Yeah.
All right.
There we go.